Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular Committee of the Whole meeting for December 12th, 2016. The clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry, and I would like to recognize that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. I'd like to call the regular meeting to order. And Ms. Gurry, can we have the introduction of late items, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. For late items this evening, staff is recommending the following additions to the agenda. For item 6A, Committee of the Whole venue change, we're adding a delegation, Mr. Tim McGrath. We are removing a report that was added on the addendum, Establishment of Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund. We're removing agenda item 7B, Downtown Nanaimo Business Association budget presentation, as well as the delegations. We're removing agenda item 7C, Nanaimo Economic Development Corporation budget 2017 report, as well as the delegations. Adding agenda item 8A, Extreme Weather Shelter for Youth. Adding agenda item 10A, Mayor McKay notice of motion, reciting of medical marijuana dispensaries. We're going to add item 13, delegations that aren't related to a report on council. The additions to the delegations already listed, we're adding Ms. Sandy McClellan to convey South End Community Association support for the TN Reimagined presentation, Mr. Leo Boone to present a review of the TN Reimagined plan and present it to council, and Mr. Tim McGrath to speak to the TN Reimagined report. We're also adding agenda item 15, the procedural motion, and a 10-minute recess at 6:30 p.m. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Yes, I'd like to add one other delegation to number 13, and that is Mr. Dan Appel on behalf of the Nob Hill Neighborhood Association.
Mr. Dan Appel.
Yep.
Councillor Kipp.
Delegate that would like to speak to 6A, Committee of the Whole. Sorry? Oh, sorry, 7A. 7A? 7A, the financial plan review, Mr. Ron Boland.
Seven A has been removed, I believe.
7A been removed?
The new 7A was removed, but the old 7A is still there. The financial plan, yes, it's still there.
Thank you. Okay, so that's under 7B.
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
And now
you.
A again.
I'm sorry, Councillor Kipp, the delegation's name was?
Ron Boland.
Thank you.
Mr. Ron Boland.
Thank you. Any other, Council? Seeing none, can we have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. First item of business is for motion of the adoption of the minutes of November 14th. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is under administration, and that is Committee of the Whole, change of venue. We have one delegation. The purpose of this item is to present Council's consideration a proposal that Committee of the Whole meetings be held in the Service and Resource Centre boardroom. First delegation is Mr. Tim McGrath. Mr. McGrath.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim McGrath, resident of Nanaimo, 431 3rd. I just wanted to appear in front of Council and indicate that not everyone is pleased with the idea of moving the cow meetings. One of the biggest concerns is going to be the availability of proper recording equipment to the same standard that we've become accustomed to. The other is the fact that when I've attended meetings there, it is extremely difficult to hear because the councillors are in a much closer proximity and they don't project their voices nearly as well. Hopefully, the new recording equipment will help solve that problem, but I don't know whether there's going to be a feedback speaker so that the audience can actually hear what's going on at the table. You may be recording it, but the audience may not be able to hear it. It also there's a problem with the sight lines in the room. And I really question on the report as to how much of it money will actually be saved. We've been encouraging people to participate in our democracy here in the city, and I think this is a step backwards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any questions for you. Councillor Kipp, was Mr. Boland wishing to speak to this one as well?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. All right, there's a staff recommendation on page, it doesn't say. Move staff recommendation that staff be authorized to take steps necessary to hold committee of the whole meetings in the Service and Resource Centre boardroom. Is there a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion. Councillor Fuller.
I'm curious, through you to staff, if we're going to install the other 3 cameras in the SARC building, because I know it's wired for it. It was just a matter of getting the equipment and doing it. So I'm wondering if that was part of moving it.
Staff able to answer that question?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the setup as it sits now in SARC is said that it could be expanded, but for budget considerations, we have not identified when that extension would be done. As of now, it will sit as it sits now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Supplemental?
Yeah. I was really curious about that, in part because when people come, they want to present, and because we switched delegations from being to items not on the agenda of regular council meetings to CAL meetings, you get organizations coming to present, and they do those things at the end of committee of the whole meetings. They like to have them taped so that they can actually provide the link on the city's website to their supporters as well as other people in the community. And unfortunately, I don't think the way it's set up with just one camera, basically pointed at the backs of most of the council members, is appropriate. So until I know that those cameras are going to be set up for sure, I don't want to support this at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I have mixed emotions on this. I think I will probably support the recommendation. And my hesitation comes down to this. If Committee of the Whole was to meet simply as a committee for more informal discussion on topics, then I think the SARC building would be a much more appropriate venue. And I would enjoy sitting around the board table there having those discussions. But it seems to me that Council has delegated virtually all authority of a council meeting to the Committee of the Whole meeting, with the exception of bylaws. And we deal with a lot of issues here at Committee of the Whole meetings which seem to be council issues. And if that's the case, I think we should be dealing with them in this larger venue that can more easily accommodate an audience. And I'm not convinced that the cost saving will be that great if we have to upgrade audiovisual concerns at the SARC building. So for me, it comes down to how the Committee of the Whole is going to be used. And I know there's no answer to that right now. But if it was simply as a meeting for a committee, then I would support it. If it's to move what appears to be a council meeting and dealing with council items, then I'm not sure that I can. So I'm still deciding. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. Originally, we moved into this building when the second story of the old City Hall was not available for wheelchair access. So we moved into this building and waited for the SARC building to open. I will suggest the location is kind of an odd room. It wasn't, I don't think, perfectly planned. As far as the recording standard, when my emotions get the best of me, I'm not always certain I want to be recorded. by that sidebar record. So the record of the city council is the written record, and the rest of it really has nothing to do with the actual record. And I know over time we haven't had great records, or I've said about our minutes that they don't reflect what was even discussed in the meeting. February 23rd, 2015, I'll just bring that one up. But that was an in-camera one anyhow, or a committee one. So the location, to me, this is expensive. This accommodates, like today, we'd probably be just sitting pretty full at that other meeting, at the other location. But as far as the ability for delegations and that, the idea to move there was for accessibility, or to come here was for accessibility. And it's still accessible back there for people with some form of physical disability or some moving. For me, it's about cost. Coming here is expensive for us. The recording here is our record is this paper that ends up at the end of the table. And so for the rest of it, to me, it's not a problem not to be here. If we know we're going to have some contentious issues, it'd be lovely to see that we had the flow of information so people could get the agenda, line up like they do to come and actually tell us they're coming. Because I didn't like the fact that, when people just show up unannounced, like big crews of people, we don't know. In this room, we had when the desk went straight across, we had the issue with the incinerator. We come out here to hundreds of people. We had one on a Wednesday morning at our SARC room just recently, where people came in and disrupted the meeting. So from my perspective, to get the work done of council, we need to sometimes be informal. And I find the SARC building a lot more informal, and the ability to move things and talk and discuss in a informal atmosphere. I find this too formal for our committee of the whole meeting. So I support the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I support the staff recommendation as well. A couple of things. I think our finance and audit committees that we do there, I like the way that we work during that. So that works out well. So, and I can't see why we couldn't do this as a CAL in the same way. And then when we do get presentations from the public that want to present and they want to be shown, then I think we should just defer all those presentations to council meetings, right? Because you get on TV that way. Our regular CAL meetings aren't even streamed on TV, it's just on the internet. So if people want to be seen and they want to be heard and they want to be recorded, then I think they can still come to a council meeting. I don't think anything stops them from doing that. So I think for us getting together in a close table, getting the work done, I think works really well for me. I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add to Councillor Fuller and Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Hong's comments. We are planning on doing a rewrite of the council procedure bylaw, which could address some of the delegation issues being referred to committee of the whole and that sort of thing, making it more of a committee of a whole and what it's supposed to be was some of the things we were going to be looking at. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Well, for the reasons given by Councillor Thorpe regarding doing virtually all the work that's done at council is also done at the CAL meetings. For that reason, I do support this. I don't support moving to SARC. I do support staying here. If, in fact, the review of the bylaw results in recommended changes from our staff and we agree with it, we can revisit this. But at this time, I prefer this setting. I think that it allows more people to observe. I oddly enough, I'm sure this comes as a great shock to everyone, but I agree with Mr. McGrath. We have been encouraging a more democratic exercise at this table, and I think that this may interfere with that, so I prefer to stay here.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I am of mixed emotions on it. I do believe that we do not use our committee of the whole properly, and I'm pleased to hear that from staff that we are going to be getting some procedural changes on that. If we did use it properly and we were using it for fulsome discussion, then I don't see any problem with us being at the SARC, because the same issues would then come forward to a regular council meeting. And at the regular council meeting, the public would have the opportunity to speak to it, and we would then debate it there as well. But if we're going to use it properly, I have no problem with it. I'm not sure whether I have faith that we can use it properly. We haven't up until now, but maybe that has got something to do with the venue rather than with anything else. So I'm not sure I want to make a decision on this tonight. I would prefer to have more of a discussion about it, because I don't see us using it properly, and I still see then I think what's going to happen is the public's going to become very frustrated. And I too agree with Mr. McGrath on that point, that the sound is not as good, there's not as much space. But if council is just there doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing at a committee of the whole meeting, which is to really debate the issues more and get a more fulsome discussion going, then that would make sense to me. I just am not sure that we should be voting on it tonight. I think we need more discussion on it. And maybe we need to hear more from our staff around the new procedural bylaws before we do it.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I have been advocating for many years that the Committee of the Whole meetings be held in a tighter venue, whereby our ability to communicate with one another is a little bit more convenient, per se, around a table. I think I've made the comment, so we can roll our sleeves up and get to work and have that wholesome discussion in a little bit less formal environment. Here, it's this meeting, and I'd prefer not to be wearing a suit and tie. I also think that it has many benefits of efficiencies for staff if to have the meeting held in the venue in which all of their resource information is, in which they work and can prepare for. I have every thought that whatever inefficiencies there are in that space as it relates to audio or visual is just mechanics. It's just something it can be addressed for the audience that's not in the audience, that's at home or wherever they are watching on a computer or otherwise. I think the sound could probably be increased or elevated or improved to ensure that everybody can hear the discussion that's taking place. And the cost savings, I don't know that we can minimize the 25 or 30,000 or whatever amount that number is on an annual basis. And as it says in the report, in 10 years, it's $250,000 or $300,000. If we find also that there's challenges that we cannot overcome by making the adjustment, my guess is that this room would probably still be available. And I think it's also important to point out that we met in the City Hall room that's called the training room for decades. That is considerably smaller than the SARC room that we're making reference to. And I've seen extremely large delegations in attendance in that room. And I also know, being on the Parks, Recreation, and Wellness committee, that committee is looking for a new location because their room is not to the standards. So this would be an opportunity to also relocate one of our larger committee meetings to that venue if necessary, and certainly they have lots of delegations and otherwise also. So I will be supporting this change to that venue, and it can certainly be a trial basis, and if it doesn't work for the reasons that I outlined, then we can always revisit and return. So I will be supporting the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
So after listening to a bit of this, there's a couple other points I'd like to hopefully have clarified. we're talking about a savings by not holding our meetings here. But how much of that is actually savings because we subsidize this place? And part of what we don't subsidize would be the amounts we pay to utilize the space. So how much of that is actually savings? Would the subsidy equal the amount that we're already paying? Would that go up by the same amount? Or would we remove the food portion and save $5,000 or $6,017? I'm not opposed to removing the food portion. That would be a savings because that isn't part of what we subsidize. So I'm curious as to how much the difference is between what we are paying now and what we would have to up the subsidy for the lack of use of the space.
Councillor.
It'd be nice to get some. I hadn't quite finished yet, so it'd be nice to get a bit of an answer
Mema.
about that. And then I got some other stuff.
Through the chair, the issue of savings, I think we need to look at it in a more realistic way from an opportunity cost perspective. The fact that you are here holding a cow means that somebody else couldn't be here to use the facility. If you moved across, the space issue means that this space becomes available for rental, however that looks like. The challenge would be, I think, would have to be placed to the operator of this place to utilize the space so they can replace the lost revenue. The issue of food, I think that's a separate conversation that I think internally we can have and look at how we can streamline that. But it definitely would be an issue of space availability to other groups that will probably pay for the use of this space.
Okay, a couple other things. Where was I? Right. If we weren't here, they could rent it out. That has happened, I think, 2 or 3 times over the last 4 or 5 years, and we've moved over to other venues. So while I get that, and it would be better if this place were rentable permanently, that would involve moving our regular council meetings as well, which I will not support if that ever comes up. Knowing that we're going to look at and hopefully do the other cameras is good. Knowing that we are revisiting the bylaw and would hopefully move those committees not on the agenda back to regular council meetings, that would be good, except some of our regular council meetings have gone to midnight and would ultimately go till 1 in the morning, so that would be bad. But I would still support it if that was going to happen. At this point, I think I will support it on a temporary basis. And I say temporary, because if it doesn't end up working, I'll definitely move to have it redone over here. I do recall the Committee of the Whole meetings being held in the boardroom over at City Hall. And when those Committee of the Whole meetings were being held, sometimes there was 1 or 2 people there, Fred being one of them, Ron being another one, Ron Boland, and sometimes myself and a few others, but it was usually only people that had a specific interest on the agenda at the time. So you weren't getting the 50, 100 people that we see sometimes here, and I think we're getting those people here simply because those are items that would be better served at a regular council meeting. So I will support this on a temporary basis.
Thank you. My apologies, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Brennan. Councillor Pratt.
I'm sure staff must have some idea, this is a question to staff, of what it's going to cost to upgrade that room to accommodate this move. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
So, through the chair, the audio and recording, I think that we just upgraded. We are beginning to realize the benefit now. I think we've only recorded the last finance meeting. The sound was exceptionally better. The picture quality was exceptionally better. It's the angles of the cameras that we'll need to deal with. Right now we have one that we can rotate to focus on certain angles in there. I think the next, if we are going to bring, I think we would need to do another camera facing the other side. And that, I think, could cost us an additional $7,000 or so. And for presenters, we do have a mic that they can use that gets projected in the audio system. And so I think the only additional piece that we would need to work on is that additional camera that gives us the angle from another.
Could I have a follow-up to that, please? So the work that's been done to date, was that done in anticipation of this, or was it something that we needed for some other use? The TV screen, the new camera, the upgraded audio?
Through the chair, if I may, you did consider upgrades, I think, last year that were going to cost in excess of $80,000, which you turned down. The work that we've just done now was to improve on the still camera that we had on there, and the anticipation we had, if there was any, was the other committees that do meet there that we are not recording as of now. If we were to upgrade the equipment, I think then it would make sense to have the cow to the standard that you would have here, because that would be different. So the upgrade as it sits now was not in anticipation of this move, but a routine upgrade.
Thank you. There's a few questions that I still have in my mind around the cost savings, and I am not going to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I just wanted to, if I could, just address a couple of things. I'd even like to go further, frankly, and that would be public hearings. There's oftentimes public hearings. From time to time, we'll have a significant audience, and from time to time, we'll come here and we're by ourselves. So I think that there's opportunities to do more in that venue than less, frankly. And when we speak to paying twice, about this venue here, and lost revenue. So we've paid for this venue, and then we pay again. So we pay a handsome rental fee for this room. I'm not criticizing the room, I'm not criticizing, we just do. We pay $2,000 a meeting. So from my perspective, and that goes into revenue, well, we've already paid for this venue. We've already paid for this space. We built the SARC building. My guess is if we move in there, I'm guessing we're not charging ourselves a rent. I'm just guessing. I'm guessing when we go to the Regional District of Nanaimo on Tuesday nights that there's no charge that we're applying to ourselves for a building that we built. I'm just guessing. So when we pay twice, I find that problematic. I don't want to say it's double dipping. I don't want to say those things. I understand that there's a fee to maintain this, to set it up, to clean it, and do all of those things. But as the landlord and as the taxpayer, then I think that we literally are paying twice. And I don't know that we should be paying twice. Now that's an accounting function, I get it. It's accounting, it's money in, it's all of that stuff. At the end of the day, I think that our city pays this venue in an approximation of $100,000 a year. So, and not all of that's food and beverage. So I'm challenged by the fact that we would wish to continue to pay for a space that could be used by a third party paying, and we could save this money by moving into our own office building. So, and I'm sure that there's those that think just quite the opposite. But that's how I feel, so I needed to put that out there on the record.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, you're on the queue again, but that was from earlier. Okay, thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I will be supporting this motion for staff to look into this. For the simple fact is the conversations, I'm looking forward to the roundtable conversation, having fruitful, respectful conversation. And I believe it's good governance to have those conversations. We haven't been able to manage to do that in our time. And it's not, of course, saving money is obviously key, but more so the decision making and having roundtable discussions is key to myself. And like Councillor Bestwick stated, if it's not working, we come back. If it's not working, none of these changes are in stone. We can always change and come back. So I just want to share those few words. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask one more question of staff, and that is, are we paying twice?
Through the chair. So the way it works is we rent this building for the meetings we have. So we get invoiced by the operator, so we pay for that. So that's the first payment. You could say you're paying twice, given the fact that you really own the building. And so that, to me, you would term it that way. But you get invoiced for the time you use here. And you can interpret the fact that you actually own the building that way as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Well, we go to the RDN and we don't even record anything we do out there. We've never have for years and decades. We've never recorded anything at the RDN, which we pay a huge percentage of their costs. Yeah, my concern is the cost comparative is what does it cost to run the SART building? What does it cost to run that room? And then not being here means we are not paying certain things and certain staff costs, so that may in fact reduce our lost cost at the end. And so I don't have that if we are here. I always like to see in an analysis is what happens if we do this and what happens if we don't do this. And you know, so if we move over there and this building isn't rented and their staffing doesn't have to be here and their audio video people don't have to be here and the kitchen isn't there, then there's a savings in that too. The building's not being operated, and it may reduce our costs. So I'm in favor of this. And like I say, I sat many years in the old council meetings, smaller meetings in smaller chambers, and it's like I say, some of the meetings would be a little less formal, and that's what I think it is. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly. Yeah, again, for me, it comes down to the purpose of the Committee of the Whole, and I would like to see our Committee of the Whole operate as a committee, a little more informal around the table. So if I may, through you to Ms. Gurry, could I ask, is there a time frame for our bylaw review or revisions?
Yes, it's past due, so I'm assuming by the end of January that we should have a draft before council. We need public consultation as well, and yeah, we should have a draft ready by the end of January for that.
Thank you very much. So just to finish off then, for me to meet as a committee, the SART building makes sense if we're using it as a true committee meeting, which we might well not even need to record, just as other committee meetings at this point are not recorded. But that would depend on the content of the meeting. I would love to see more informal roundtable discussions, as others have said. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to finish off for myself, and that was if we go back to 1951 when the City Hall was built, the council chambers was actually on the south end of the building up above, and that was where council meetings were held. There was not the level of participation by the public that there is today. Move into the 70s and in the 80s when council moved, they needed the room, so they moved out to the regional district offices. If we look at the cow at the RDN, we get many of the items that come from committee to cow, then they go to the board. So you're seeing for the second time. If we experience what we see here in Nanaimo, where we do first and second reading and then go to public hearing for third, many times we have a large audience that wants to talk at first and second reading when it first comes to council. So I'm cognizant of that. The SARC boardroom, I hate that room. It's very cold. It's not conducive to good conversation. It's gray on gray on gray. It's also very, in addition to what Mr. McGrath said about trying to hear council when they're facing the opposite direction is very difficult, and it's compounded by the fact that the ventilation system in that room is extremely noisy. So when you're sitting in the audience, you can't hear what people are saying simply when the air conditioning happens to kick in. So I can't at this point support it. My main reason for that is because when we look at the level of public participation that is being demanded by governments, all governments, what we're seeing here now with 25 or 30 people in the room today, we're going to see more participation, not less. So I say that I can't support this at this time. Councillor Kipp.
You just gave me a great idea. Maybe we don't go in that room in the SARC building. Maybe it needs, I hate to say, a brand new building needs some renovation. We've done that at a few buildings. We did that at our arena. We have a mostly open upper floors empty. We have a beautiful cafeteria on the third floor that would probably accommodate a bigger room than this. And we could maybe fit it in somewhere in that building because I think the third floor is almost empty. So having a bigger area, that was a poorly designed room if it was ever intended to be a council room. As a designer, I never even got to see what we were doing in that. That building cost us so much money, $14 million, and I don't even think it functions well. But maybe there's another floor we could host council meetings on, and people would be allowed to take the elevator up and because it's all locked off wherever you go up there anyhow. So maybe that room is not the right room, but maybe we do have something upstairs in that empty third floor or somewhere there. We have to think about things and try different things. And for me, I like to look at continuing the SARC, so I think it's time to call the question because I think everybody's made up their mind.
Councillor Fuller.
When we talk about ventilation and level of transparency and what's being required, the SARC building allows us the opportunity to actually tape our committee meetings as well if all the committee meetings are held there. That's a huge level of transparency. People might be interested in knowing what's going on with our committees and viewing that. I personally find the ventilation in this place horrid because I can't breathe in here. I find it extremely hard to breathe in here. I'm willing to move there temporarily. If it doesn't work, we come back. We are looking at reviewing the procedures, and I think that is a huge step, which could see the main reason for coming here in the first place brought back to regular council meetings. So I'm going to support it now.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Shows Councillor Brennan, Mayor McKay, and Councillor Pratt, opposed. Motion carries. Next one is 2017 Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Resolution. And the purpose is to obtain Council's direction regarding the submission of resolutions to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities for consideration at the 2017 Annual General Meeting. And its staff recommendation is that Council identify topics and provide general drafting instructions to staff on any resolutions and authorize staff to prepare draft resolutions for Council approval for the 2017 January 16 regular Council meeting. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. If appropriate, that staff be directed to assist in the preparation of a motion as it relates to trapping of the type of trapping utilized for trapping of animals, so snare traps and otherwise. I think it's a concern beyond the city or the regional district of Nanaimo, and approximately 4 years ago, we did pass a motion to eliminate snare traps. I believe that's what, in this regional district or the city of Nanaimo. And I don't know if action has occurred. It's my understanding that it hasn't. And my understanding is that it was to have gone to the province for ensuring that, and this frankly was as a result of development in our north end and property owners using traps that were inhumane for beavers, and then it ended up being potentially dogs that were out for runs and other things. So I would like that to be something that we can discuss, and I'd be happy to come and visit with staff at City Hall and discuss it further. So that's in principle what I'm seeking, and that's number one. And number two would be the participation of staff in creating a motion as it relates to provincially regulated or mandated compensation for all public employees. Which I would also be happy to come in before and then bring it back at our next meeting or another meeting if necessary. Because as I understand it, you're asking for topics and loosely worded, if you will, but knowing to work on the motions themselves. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one as well, and I'll call it unredeemed container deposits. And I've actually got something that's drafted, and where it says, whereas in the province of BC, somewhere between $10 and $15 million annually is collected for deposit on containers, but is not redeemed. And whereas communities and regional districts are implementing innovative and valuable recycling programs, including social enterprise participation, therefore be it resolved that the AVICC requests the provincial government redirect unredeemed container deposits to communities and regional districts for the express purpose of funding recycling initiatives, including social enterprise participation. And my reason for that is that we are at we've taken off all the low-hanging fruit in the city of Nanaimo, and we're working on some of the more difficult to recycle. We've got a social enterprise called the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange that is struggling for mere survival. We've still got mattresses going into the landfill, taking up extremely valuable space in the landfill, and they could be one of the proponents of recycling of those types of items and other orphan products. And when I say orphan products, I'm talking about what may be contained in your garden shed. However, we're always struggling with trying to figure out how to provide funding to social enterprises such as the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange, and that there's $10 to $15 million out there that communities could and should go after. So I've got a copy of that, Ms. Greer, I can give to you. Any others, Council? Councilor Yoakum.
Thank you. I've been thinking about this for somewhat now, and in the area of reconciliation, First Nations, and thinking where the city could take a lead. And I think there's many benefits of recognizing reconciliation, as we should, and it's a just thing to do, but nonetheless also beneficial. And I'd like to think of where the city could take a lead with our neighboring communities along the coast on some form of reconciliation type language. I've been thinking, I don't have the language in front of me, I'm not prepared, but I've been thinking about we could be front runners for that, and it would be not just beneficial business-wise, but just beneficial for the lives of First Nations in the city, etc. for that. So I don't know where I have a vision, but I'm not really being very articulate at this point. But I think I'll work with staff, Mr. McCray and Ms. Simon when she returns. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCray.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Should any members of council wish to submit rough draft documents in regards to these submissions for resolution, staff will gladly work with you to provide that back for the December 19th meeting.
December 19th.
December 19th, there's a deadline of January 16th. Okay. We got enough to do on December 19th. Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Do we bring these up first at AVICC and then to UBCM, or can we pick and choose, or can we do both, or what's staff's take on this?
Generally, they go to your local government association first, and then on to the larger group, if accepted there.
Okay, sounds good. Then I would like to actually talk about going after insurance companies for the services that our firefighters provide. Prime example was the Jeans Burns building, where we had all our firefighters on scene. Then we had to call in overtime, and taxpayers had to pay for that when there's an insurance company that do that. So, and I know that they do this out east, so I would actually like to bring that up. Now, they did show this at FCM when I was there last year on how to do it, and it's actually in the insurance clauses that we can go after insurance companies for losses for our firefighters and the time that we put into that to recoup some of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this, but we have an issue in our community with marinas and the fees that they are being charged. And I'm wondering if this isn't something that other communities are grappling with as well on Vancouver Island and certainly along the coast. And on the mainland. And so I would like to work with staff around that to kind of massage it a little bit. But the idea of some kind of new model of how we charge marinas, or what kind of a tariff we put on marinas that works for them so that they're able to thrive in their communities and also works for the city or whoever else is involved. Pardon?
How they're regulated, is that the thing? Who regulates them, how they're regulated, and how it is fair across the board?
Well, right now what we have is two very different models here in our own community, and it's not working for half of the marinas. And so I think this is a real vital issue that needs to be addressed so that we all expressed some weeks ago how vital our marinas and our harbor was to our community, and so I think this is a really important issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. So, Ms. Curry, there is a motion that's been put in here. I don't imagine there's really any reason at this point to go to move and second that motion, is there? We've done what was asked.
Yes, you have done what has
Thank you.
been asked.
Thank you. So I recommend we move on to the next one, which is Federation of Canadian Municipalities resolutions. And it's for the same reason, that for the same purpose, that council identify topics and provide general drafting instructions to staff on any resolutions to be submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And also to authorize staff to prepare draft resolutions for council approval at the 2016 December 19 regular council meeting. So obviously, their deadline for resolutions is much shorter than AVICC. Councillor Fuller.
I actually think this one would be extremely appropriate for the recommendation from Councillor Pratt, because not only are there communities on Vancouver Island, but Canada has one of the largest coastlines in the world. And if our marinas are having problems, one has to wonder if other marinas throughout the country are having those same issues. So it might be a very appropriate motion to bring forward to the FCM as well as the AVICC.
I would agree with you. Councillor Pratt?
I have no problem with that, but I definitely want it to go to the AVICC. So, yeah.
Thank you. So you'll work with staff on that one as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. So this is why I asked my first question, whether we go to ABICC first or UBCM, and now we're doing FCM. So if we don't get the endorsement from ABICC and then from UBCM, what's the point of us bringing anything forward to FCM when we don't even have our local? So this is, that's why I'm confused on why we even would talk about FCM when, isn't it usually UBCM initiatives that get forwarded to FCM? I've never seen too many local people trying to go straight right to FCM. So that's just a question I had. So I didn't know if there was a point doing this or not. Thank you.
I think you're correct that normally it goes through the local government associations onto your provincial and then on to federal. But as that's a federal matter, I agree with Councillor Fuller that should go there, I think. Ms. Curry?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would hope that councillors, if they do have resolutions for the FCM one, if they could get it to us by the end of this week to have on the agenda for you next week.
Yes, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the 2017-2021 Financial Plan Review. And there's a presentation by Mr. Mema. First off, we have a delegation, Mr. Ron Boland.
Your Worship, presentations go first.
Oh, pardon me. You can sit down, Mr. Boland. We'll have you after the presentation. Oh. Mr. Boland, can you come to the podium, please, so that we can record what you're saying? I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, due to the weather, I didn't get here till the last minute, but my delegation this evening is concerned with the establishment of a strategic infrastructure reserve fund.
Correct.
Which I had on my agenda as 7A.
Correct.
But now I see this is 7A.
Correct.
I'm confused.
that item has been pulled from tonight's agenda.
Oh, okay. I've been informed of others, but not of this one, and I may have missed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we have no delegation for this one. Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Worship. I thought I was the delegation. If you could indulge us, I'll speak from here so that if you have questions that require us to run some numbers, the two ladies could quickly do that for you. The reason why we asked to present tonight is we got a request from members of the public who did not have an opportunity. They have watched the recordings that we've had at the committee level, and they wanted at least to have one meeting before you decide in the evening, and hopefully they can also speak to the draft plan. I forgot. So I wanted to start off by talking about a slide that we have shared with you. It helps at least members of council as well as members of the public to understand how municipal funds flow and where we get our money from and how we spend those funds. I'm going to move slightly quicker here. So at the top, we try to group up the revenue sources that we have. And the major one here in Canada is obviously the property taxes, followed by user fees. And for those communities where you have gaming facilities, you would have casino revenues. You have investment income, which is money or interest you get from funds that you keep in the bank. So invest in certain investment instruments. You also get back from the province traffic fines revenue. You also get a regional parks agreement. You have gas tax funding, and then the Fortis agreement. So this becomes the basket of revenue sources for us. What we then do is we spend this money on the annual operating budget for city services. And within city services, you would have community development, which is the planning department, social planning, culture and heritage, police, fire, transportation, drainage, solid waste, collection, parks and recreation, sewer and water, and general government and debt repayments. This is for the operating side. on the capital projects, we have specific projects that is either new infrastructure or new and upgrade of infrastructure, which is asset management, and also some planning work that we undertake. We also put some money away for the rainy day under reserves, and here we do have, I think, a robust system for asset management reserves, and we also put away the money that we get from the Community Works Fund, which is a gas tax fund, into a reserve that we redirect towards capital expenditures from year to year. So this is where the money comes from. This is how we allocate it to three sources: operating revenue and expenditures, and then capital expenditures and revenues, and then reserves for the future. So how did we get here? Or we've come, I think, a long ways. From June 2016, Council did work through the 2016 to 2019 update to the strategic plan. We had an e-town hall that was run by Mr. Cooper's department on the strategic priorities on July 25th. We have held a number of Finance and Audit Committee meetings, the first at October 4th, where we provided Council with a high-level review of our financial status and our draft budget, and sought for direction as to what Council needed to see brought forward. We followed up on November 1st to deal with sewer and water. And sewer and water, why we separated the discussion, and we'll do this going forward, is we usually run into an issue where we confuse utility or user-supported revenue, supported operations like our water and sewer. Those, we keep them in a separate fund, so we do not commingle these with our property taxes, and we try to match the revenues with the costs that are associated in delivering those products. And then on November 16th, we dealt with the general government, which is really general operations of the city. So I would like to start off, before getting into details about the budget, on an update on the 2016 to 2019 strategic plan and priorities and initiatives that Council directed staff to work on. You may recall that you had identified 5 priority capital projects as well as 2 initiatives. This is how we are reflecting the 5 strategic priorities in terms of capital projects in the budget as it sits now. The first one being the Port Drive South Downtown Waterfront. Within 2017 and 2018, we have allocated about $6.3 million for the Wilcox access, or alternative access, for the Port Drive South Downtown Waterfront. Currently, there is a study underway to identify access options and costs, and once this is done, this will be brought to Council for consideration. Secondly, you identify the Bourbon Park Facilities Redevelopment Master Plan, and we currently have, I think, half the budget for this work to be started this year, and our understanding that this will actually be delved into more in 2017 going forward. But in the meantime, you have received, I think, presentations on the bike park in 2016, and there's some work that is ongoing in that aspect. Then we have the event center, and originally I think we had called it the Sports and Entertainment Facility, and the name has evolved to an event center. Currently we have gone through phase 1. We're about to conclude phase 2, which is coming before you at next Monday's meeting. Then we have the Waterfront Walkway, and between 2017 and 2018, you have approved that we direct about $1.4 to $2 million of our appeals towards this work, and we should begin to see more of this discussion, I think, in the public arena beginning in Q1. As of now, we have concepts and some direction as to how to proceed with that. Within the budget as well, we have provided for the Georgia Avenue Greenway about $1 million. Design will be completed in 2017, and then construction is slated for 2018. So that completes the 5 capital projects that you identified as your priorities and how they sit in the budget as it is contemplated now. You identified 2 initiatives. The first one was the poverty reduction or affordable housing.
We do have an annual contribution to the Housing Legacy Reserve of about $165,000, and that's going to continue. As of now, we have in that reserve about $2.7 million. We have in 2017 allocated about $150,000 for an affordable housing strategy and also the social wellness strategy. So $200,000 is being allocated to meet, or at least to plan, your poverty reduction or affordable housing initiative that you identified. Secondly, you also identified property acquisition. As it sits today, we annually budget about $600,000 in our recurring budget for property acquisitions. There is a business case, I think, that the Development Services Group has brought forward that would ask us to increase this to about $1 million. So a net increase of about $400,000, which is under consideration, and we'll see how we can find revenue sources to increase that. As of now, the property acquisition reserve has a current balance of about $1.4 million. So that concludes an update, at least, as to how your strategic priorities are now reflected in the budget as they sit. At the Finance and Audit meeting last week, we introduced for the first time an initiative to come up with a strategic infrastructure reserve. And you directed that you, in principle, were in agreement with the idea, but you wanted to have a fulsome discussion on the funding sources. And we intend that that could happen at the next council meeting, which would be the December 19th meeting. But as of now, because this affects your budget in a significant way, I will share a few comments for those who were not in attendance or have not watched the recording for the Finance and Audit meeting of last Thursday. So why are we bringing this up? The City of Nanaimo currently has, I think, a robust asset management strategy. We have, I think, healthy reserves, as we will demonstrate later in this presentation, around our asset management or renewal of assets. What we have lacked or have somewhat acted from a reaction perspective is to deal with strategic infrastructure or legacy projects that you may want to deal with. This conversation, I think, if I recall from my remarks on Thursday, really was sparked by conversations I had with the mayor when I got here about how other communities actually dedicate their gaming money or the casino revenue towards some projects that they can point to and say, we're using this money for that project. And so I did mention then that if we were to move and shift this money, it would require a property tax increase. And my estimate then, and which is still the same now, is about 3% increase that would be required to shift these funds from general revenues to that strategic reserve. So what we're trying to do here is to shift the gaming revenue and also the Fortis revenue as the two that we have identified over a period of 4 years. Why we want to do that is to be able to lessen the impact on property taxes as we make that shift. So what would this be used for? It would be used for strategic priorities or strategic projects. It can also be used for debt repayment for projects that you may endeavor to undertake from time to time. So I've already alluded to the impact to our taxes. As of now, we are collecting about $2.4 million on average, and I have said that gaming funds move up and down with the general economy. And obviously, at some point, I think we used to get more than that number. It dropped off with the Great Recession, and it's beginning to rebound. And so, on average, we ascertained that at least about just over $2 million would be at least received. We would then also redirect about $500,000, at least this one starting in 2017, for the Fortis revenue money into this reserve. If we identified at least just these two, this would give us about $3 million annually going into that reserve. For those who were paying attention when I made the first conversation, is there's two numbers that you don't see here now. The first one has to do with the RCMP contract. After looking at the numbers internally and figuring out how we wanted to best use the RCMP funding model, is we would make changes. As of now, we are funding the RCMP contract at about 95%, and we continue to experience consistent reserve transfers because of surpluses out of that line item. Now, this is not unique to Nanaimo. You would find this in most communities' way of RCMP. Structurally, the way the contract is structured, and the way the RCMP places its members and the time lags that they take, and certain aspects of that contract that the city has to fund, it is rare that you use all the money that you budget for if you were budgeting at 100%. And so we've looked at prior experience with the city. Right now, we do have a policy that if we experience a surplus in this fund, we will take that into a specific reserve. And we have that reserve sitting at about $3 million. So the way we would use this model is, in order for us to replace the lost revenue by shifting the gaming money, we would change the funding model from 95% to 92% to lessen the property tax impact. So that's the change that you see from what we discussed last Thursday. And the other number that you don't see here is we were contemplating to allocate about 50% of the Community Works Fund. After looking at it closely, we realized that it has some limitations in terms of what you can use it for. And also maybe we should just leave that fund as it sits. It's still available for council to direct it towards any other project that they may wish to, which could be a strategic project upfront, but it would not pay for debt service for certain other initiatives. So we wanted to keep that clean. And so those are the brief comments that I will share with you. That report is going to come back on December 19th for you to debate in full and vote on the funding sources that we identified. I'm going to quickly move on to our property taxes and our user fees as we think they would turn out in 2017. Everybody would like to know what the projected property tax increases or rates would look like. At this point, we are proposing that our taxes go up by 2% in 2017, by 1.8% in 2018, 1.7% in 2019, 1.5% in 2020, and 0.5% in 2021. Now, these reflect, for full disclosure, they reflect the funding model for the strategic infrastructure reserve, the model around the policing contract funding. On the user, I'll go back. Just 1 second. Thank you. Thank you.
If I can, Mr. Member, so these are taking into account the Strategic Infrastructure Fund establishment?
These reflect our model and assumption that if you were to buy wholesale, what we're recommending to you, the property tax impact would look like this. And so when you have your fulsome discussion next week, Ms. Duncan will walk you through what those impacts would be.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
So just to be clear, if we didn't have the infrastructure fund, our taxes would be 0%. Is that correct?
No, they wouldn't.
Okay, then I thought that's what you said was the impact from that, so I'm lost.
Okay. So maybe let's finish this presentation. You're going to have a chance to discuss this whole thing. It's a little bit complicated, and I didn't want to complicate this presentation, at least for tonight. But I can reach out and clean that up, and Ms. Duncan will walk you through that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So on the user fee increases. Sewer user fees will increase by 5% in 2017 and 4% in the next 4 years, which is 2018 through 2022. And this is for asset management purely. And our water user fees will increase by 7.5% in 2017 through to 2020. And the split between the 7.5% is 5% is for the long-term water strategy and 2.5% is for asset management. Solid waste is going up by 2%, and this does not reflect the options that we've brought to you relative to recycling. And as I mentioned at the Finance Committee meeting, if and as and when we bring this report back to you, if there's any impact to user fees, we would have to amend this aspect. But this just reflects business as we are doing it today. So from a property tax perspective, we tried to compare ourselves with other municipalities, and we picked a number. And we just did an average for the past 5 years, and we got this information from the province. Nanaimo sits at an average of about 2.5% over the last 5 years, with the least average property tax compared to the other ones. This is just for context. I talked about the increase of 2% in 2017. And here we're trying to capture what a typical household would be impacted, how they'll be impacted. And here we have a mix of taxation and user fees, just for clarity's sake. So from a city's perspective, we are contemplating an increase of about $42, split by $38 in taxation, $2.33 in water fees, and about 28 cents in garbage, and about $1 in garbage fees. We do know we've received the requisition, at least from the Vancouver Island Regional Library. The requisition has gone up by 5.4% in 2017. We have received the provisional numbers from RDN, which indicate they will be going up by 6.1%. But this is preliminary at this stage, as you are aware that those conversations will continue until Q1. So if you add up the property tax as well as utilities and requisitions that we know as of today, a typical household would be impacted by an increase of about $54 in 2017. We do not have other requisitions that we have in terms of the MFA as well as the hospital, and those we will get towards the end of Q1 in 2017. So where does your money go? I think that's the question that most people would ask. And in this instance, I'm simply talking about property taxes. So where do your property taxes go? And for reference point, when I talk of a typical home in Nanaimo, we're talking of a home with an assessment of about $348,000. That's a typical home in Nanaimo. So where do the tax dollars go? They pay for city services, which is police, fire, transportation, drainage, parks, and community development. They pay for debt. And for us here at the City of Nanaimo, we are carrying debt on the port of Nanaimo, which is the theater, fire station number 4, and then the aquatic center, as well as what we're not listing here, which you will see as an addition, would be the water treatment plant. But we're not showing this here because here I'm simply dealing with the property tax funded aspect of our operation. We'll also pay for projects, and then we also put money away for reserves. So a typical home, like I said, with an assessment of about $348,000, their tax bill would be estimated at about $1,936. So what does that buy the resident of the City of Nanaimo? The bulk of it, about 78% of that, goes to city services, which is about $1,502. Then you have about $60 going to debt service, about $136 going to capital projects, $155 going to reserves, and then the difference of $83 going to Vancouver Island Regional Library. And this is exclusive of any requisitions other than the library, and this is what is spent here in the city of Nanaimo. If you take that 1,936 and broke it up a little bit to see in more detail where the funding goes to, I've already alluded to the fact that about 78% of that goes to general municipal services, and we can break that general municipal services into various pieces. The first one at the top there being the general government, which is the support departments being finance, legislative services, IT, the CAO's office, HR. They cost a typical household in the city of Nanaimo about $225 a year. And if you want to be more specific, that's about 62 cents a day. Community development, which is our planning department, they cost about $93 to a typical household, which equates to about 25 cents a day. Parks and recreation, they cost about $239 a day, which equates to about 65 cents a day to a typical household in the city of Nanaimo. Engineering, parks, and public works, they cost about $183 a year, which turns out to be about 50 cents a day for the good work that they do. I think they did a good work cleaning up the snow. At least my wheels were not spinning this morning. But that's about 50 cents a day. And then Nanaimo Fire Rescue, they're about $260 to a typical household, which comes to about 71 cents a day. RCMP and police services, they cost about $454, which is about $1.25 a day. And then the Port of Nanaimo costs about $20 a year, which is about 5 cents a day. And then we have economic development, which costs about $29, which is just about 8 cents a day. That just tries to put this into perspective for us. So that's where our property taxes go. That's what they buy for a typical household for the city of Nanaimo. So having done that, I will now go quickly into the actual budget. Number of assumptions to work with. The first one, obviously, that people ask.
What do you prefer, Mr. Mema?
I think I'll take questions as it goes, so it's informal, so you can have.
Okay. Councillor Kip.
Back one slide, please. Well, that would have been two, yeah. Good call, thank you. Is that based on tax requisition, not population?
So this is a typical household that pays property taxes here, not population.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Once you go using the population, the per capita calculations, the numbers become a little smaller, but they're meaningless because not everybody pays the taxes. But the typical household, I think, is a better measure for us. Thank you. So the first number that I didn't put up here really is what is 1% equivalent to. 1% is equivalent to about, I'm looking at Ms. Duncan, I'm thinking about 985,000. 1% of property taxes here is about $985,000. So in 2017, what you will see is we have put about $900,000 in a contingency fund for both QP and exempt staff. The current QP contract expires just now at the end of December. We would be coming back through the HRA department seeking for a mandate for negotiations at some point in 2017. For inflation, we are assuming about 2%. I know we get a lot of questions that say, well, your inflation is 1.8, 1.6, why did you go with 2%? Really, for municipalities, CPI is not a good measure. It's not the same basket of things that we buy. Those who have time and resources, they have begun to develop what they call the Municipal Spending Index, which reflects the type of things that we buy, construction and everything else that we do. But 2% or the CPI usually comes in handy for us for purposes of planning. And so we are also assuming that our revenues would increase, excluding sewer and water, about 1% going forward. So that's context to the numbers that we have. Our budget for 2017 is about $165 million, and it's split as shown. I'll just maybe make 2 comments on this. Property taxes account for about 61% of our total revenue, and that's not unusual. Most municipalities really is a 60-40 split. The challenge that you normally have is when you drill down into your property taxes is where really do your property taxes come from? And smaller organizations or smaller cities, obviously, most of your property taxes comes from residential as opposed to your commercial. On the operating side, our costs about $132 million, which is a net increase of about $1.9 million, and I'll talk about where that pressure is coming from. And so if you're looking at revenues of $165 million and $132 million in expenditures, the difference is what flows through to fund our capital and reserve allocations going forward. So what's driving the $1.9 million increase? First, we still have the $1 million in asset management, which is coming up for review in 2017. And then we have $1.4 million in wage increases, which includes the contingency of $900,000 that I shared with you, and also 2 additional positions that are at play or are being contemplated. Also includes a 2.5 increase for the fire group. We also have the impact. This is what I was talking about, Your Worship, when I said once I start moving the gaming money, the impact of that strategy here is $1.1 million transition between the gaming funds and the Fortis revenue into that other fund. And then we would have $1.6 million in new property tax revenue from growth. That gives you your net of $1.9 million that you need to find through property taxation, which is your 2% that we are talking about. So that's it on the operating side. On the capital side, a couple of slides for you. In the next 5 years, we're looking at about just under $200 million. In 2017, about $42 million. And the graphs just indicate in total the 42 in 2017 and just over 50 in 2018, and then it drops in future years. Key projects that you will see of the $192 million is $179 million is for infrastructure renewal, which is asset management, $6.9 million for the Port Theatre expansion, and as I said last Thursday, this is a placeholder for us as the funding for this gets triggered when the Port Theatre Society puts their funding in place together. And then we have $2.6 million for Harewood Central Park, $8 million for new pedestrian, cycling, and transit amenities. And I did mention the $990 for Georgia Greenway when I spoke about the strategic update, about $200,000 for affordable housing strategy and the poverty reduction, which is also part of your strategic plan initiative. And then we are planning to invest about $500,000 in the next 5 years for public art. So where does the funding for projects come from? Reserves, I think, drive most of this. A little bit of debt at about 8%. Then we do have some cash that we transfer from operating and user fees towards capital projects. And then we also have reserves from our utilities, water and sanitary sewer, also contributing for their projects in a similar manner. If you're looking at reserves, our reserves are ramping up. from just about 98 million to about just over 130 million by 2021. And by reserves, what you're seeing there are all contingency reserves, infrastructure renewal, council initiative reserves, capital reserves, and our DCC reserves. On the debt front, the city of Nanaimo is at the end of December 31st. We're doing so well. We're projecting this. We are projecting that we would be carrying about $44 million in debt. We are planning to borrow for the Wellcox access about $6 million. Also for sewer about $5.2 million. And the projected debt, if this is brought in line, I think over the 5 years would bring this up to $59 million. Debt service, from a principal perspective, we talked about the $44 million. We do have our limits when it comes to debt service set by the province. Our debt service limit is really set as a percentage of what we pay based on a formula that is provided by the province, and that is about 25% of what I would loosely call recurring revenue. And your debt service here is really a combination of principal and interest together. As it sits, our current debt service limit is about $34 million a year, and currently we are utilizing about 14.2% of that $34 million, which is about $4.7 million. I know a few people who did speak to me when we were out at the open houses. I was speaking of a number about $5 million, but remember we just paid off, I think end of October, about $1 million for the parkade. So that reflects the reduction in that number. So where do our debt utilization stand compared to other municipalities? We are sitting at about 14.2%. If you look at other municipalities, I think the highest you see there is is Kelowna at 45, and everybody's all over the place. These numbers, we provide them for context because really you don't know what's behind and what the community is really dealing with for them to end up with these debt numbers. But they give you the context, at least for comparison, at a high level. So the blank screen means that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you. Number one is you referenced the Port of Nanaimo Center, and you referred to it as the theater. The Port of Nanaimo Center is actually this building.
My apologies, Your Worship.
The other one was 6.9, and I know we've had this discussion at Finance and Audit, 6.9 for the Port Theater. Money has to come in to the city because we own the building, and then it has to go out as an expense. That's
correct.
why we need to show it the way we do. Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Mr. Mema, for the update. I just want to touch on the couple comments. And first of all, in my opinion, we're sitting sound financially, good work. And I just want to touch on the page 26 of the 2%, 1.8, 1.7, 1.5, and 0.4 tax increases, proposed tax increases for those next 5 years. When I first got on council 2 years ago, and over numerous years, council, the first projection we had from the former regime of running the city, those numbers were much higher. I remember in 2018 it was going to be around, I think it's between 4% and 6%, somewhere in there, or maybe even higher. So I want to touch on the politics and the noise around the city, and lost in all the noise is the good hard work this council is doing to keep the taxes in check. Not all the council agrees with keeping these taxes in check, but many of us campaigned to make sure we kept the tax fatigue in check. So I'm really proud that the hard work of us is coming out. It shows right there. And we don't have this slide when I first got on council, but I would beg to differ that I know that 217 on page 26, those rates were drastically higher. And we had to push and lobby internally to make sure we kept it in check. And so I just wanted to share that for the viewers and the taxpayers out there. Minus all the unnecessary noise, we are working hard to keep this in check, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about from the taxpayer, those numbers right there. And we're working hard to make sure we can. Not easy, but I think the regime today are understanding the will of council, and that's majority of council. So I'm really pleased with those numbers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mima. I appreciate the report. You indicated typical household 348 plus or minus. Is that province or is that city of Nanaimo?
The city of Nanaimo.
Thank you. One of the ways I believe in reducing taxes is increasing revenues, obviously. And one of the topics that I wish that I mentioned to Mr. McRae about the AVICC, which I should have at the time, was, and I didn't, and with council's indulgence, I may add that as another AVICC item, would be the Airbnb. And Airbnb, there's a lot of money left on the table. If we were to be applying the 2% hotel, whatever, motel MRDT tax, that we currently don't receive any benefits from today. So hopefully that might be an item that any municipalities, cities, or otherwise on Vancouver Island may wish to entertain, because there's lots and lots of money there, not unlike the money for the return that the mayor put on the table there with the plastic. So what amount of money now represents 1% of tax in the city? What's the amount?
That's about 985,000.
Excuse me?
985,000.
980. So, okay, so that's increased significantly. I just wanted to ask, when you're showing us the amounts, and it was $6.9 million for the Port Theatre expansion.
So we had this, I think, discussion about what number for us to show for the Port Theatre expansion. The building, we own the building. Council made a commitment that you would provide some funding to the Port Theatre Society, and your commitment really is split between two. One, they are both borrowing. There's a loan, there's a guarantee, and then there's a loan. And so we are keeping these as placeholders in our budget, because you've made that commitment that once they get their other sources in place, you would proceed to release those funds.
Thank you. So my challenge with this, and I know that this is a report this is information, and we're not debating it or anything like that right now. 6.9 has grown from our original position on the Port Theatre expansion, our contribution, that is. And when I think of our our taxation, we've put in a number of 6.9 million. So we put in $7 million that we're taxing our citizens on for 2017. Is that correct?
No.
But so we're not. But we are for 2.6 for the Harewood Centennial Park. And we are for the 990,000 for Georgia Greenway, but not 7,010,000. But it says there that it's in the 2017. So I'm confused, because if we're not taxing for those amounts, then why are we putting it in there? Why don't we asterisk those things, put them down at the bottom? Of course, as you very well know, I'm not an accountant, but it makes no sense to me to put $7 million for a theater expansion or $8 million for a new pedestrian cycling transit amenities if we're only spending 990 and spending none on the Port Theatre either. I just don't understand why those are inserted in our totals, because those numbers are in our totals of capital projects for 2017, for 2018.
So, thank you. I've said this is a placeholder for us. So from an accounting perspective, we would show an equal amount coming in, an equal amount going out. So the net effect is zero, which is the conversation that I was talking about last Thursday, where we said we would keep these as a placeholder, and alternatively, we would have an asterisk that says you have a commitment of this much. But it has no impact on your property taxes until the other party has their funding in place. So this number keeps getting pushed from year to year, waiting for the other party to come through the door and say, our money is now in place.
Thank you. So, and I'll try not to, but I don't know how the number went to 6.9 from where we started and where it's going to go then in 2018, for example. Because we've also had this conversation about the bridge repair. So it says $5,450,000 to repair it today and $5,450,000 to repair it in 2036. That number doesn't grow. So whether it's just playing with numbers or not, to me, it's an inconsistent application for this P-brain. I know there's way more smarter people than I am about how we put these numbers together and how it impacts and influences our taxations.
So, through the chair, I think the last comment I would make is the 6.9 number does not change. You've made your commitment. It's split. I think there's 4.6 in debt. You made guarantees for the difference. So that number will not change.
We made guarantees for the difference. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
If you could go back to the 2017-2021 financial plan, that little bar that had the increases. Yeah. I'm curious as to those numbers being what they are. And I was looking at what we received in October, on October 4th, with regards to projected numbers. And these are actually higher than the projected numbers from October 4th. So I'm wondering why they are higher, except for 2017. 2017 now is 2, before it was 2.1. 2018 is 1.8, but in October it was 1. 2019 is 1.7. In October it was 0.9. 2020, 1.5 was 1. And 2021.4 was 0.5. So the numbers are actually primarily increasing.
So through the chair, I'd like to apologize for not showing. We debated about the slide this morning of showing the differences. And so the number of things that have changed, and Ms. Duncan will speak to that shortly, but what you're seeing now, we've tried to reflect. The major piece is the impact of moving the gaming revenue, if we did, and there's smaller things that played into that. But when we bring this for final approval next week, you will basically be able to walk through where we started and where we ended and why those numbers change.
Yeah, I recognize, like Councillor Yoakum, that prior to October they were even higher.
Yeah.
And then they dropped to October, and now they've gone up again. And if the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Plan is actually causing increases, then that goes counter to what you were saying about it being able to decrease. So, but I'll leave more of that for next week. No. Thanks.
Ms. Duncan.
So just to highlight the significant changes between the draft that you're originally presented with and the numbers that we're looking at now, one of the biggest changes in 2017 is growth. So growth helps us. It actually reduces our property tax increase. When we do the draft budget, we always use 1.2 million as our estimate, and then when we receive better information, more current information from BC Assessment, we adjust that. So the latest information we've received from BC Assessment is that it's 1.6 in 2017, so that helps us a lot. So we were able to put in place the changes for the new infrastructure reserve with little impact in 2017 due to that, plus the change in the RCMP estimate, but it definitely had an impact in years 2 to 4, and that's why you'll see slight increases there. In year 5, why it drops down is we've paid off the debt for NAC, the Aquatic Center. Okay. So those are the most significant changes.
Thank you. Councillor Kep.
I'm back on that Port Theatre money, and I want to ask a quick question. In our projected budget, we show $4.5 million to be carried as debt. And what's the carrying charge on 4.5 now? 300,000, 380 a year, 400 a year? What?
So, okay, I'll let Ms. Duncan speak to that. Without repeating what I said, maybe you may.
Well, so let me finish my question, because what it would be is we put 4.5 in the budget in case it happens this year.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost us $400K to cover that money for this year. So we have to tax that money into our budget this year. Where does that go if we don't spend it this year? So I'm saying $400K on 4.5 for a carrying charge. Probably less than that now. Yeah. But where does it go? Because it's taxed for this year. The project will not happen. So that money has been collected. That's what you were saying. But I'm explaining it, and I'm trying to explain it different because I didn't get the answer I want, because that money is collected, and I want to know where it goes.
Me too. Okay, so what we have in the plan here is the 6.9 for Port Theatre in 2018. Because what happened is we have the first part of it, whatever it was, the just over 5 million in the 2016 budget. And we have it fully funded from grants and private contributions. No impact on taxation. In 2017, nothing in the budget for Port Theatre, because we're going to carry forward that budget from 2016. Again, no impact on property taxes. However, in 2018, the second part of that cost for the Port Theatre expansion, the just over $6 million, is budgeted in 2018, with 4.6 coming from borrowing. It actually impacts 2019 because that's when we start making the repayment. So it most definitely is part of that increase that you're seeing in 2019, but not till then. We will not be taxing in 2017 for debt repayment for Port Theatre, not until 2017. And depending on how things go, if it gets pushed out for, further, then.
Okay, that makes, so if it's not collected, that's fine. If it's collected and it doesn't proceed, where would it go?
So I think if you remember when we discussed, we came up with an option where we said if we did tax, we would, I think the number we had in our heads was about $309,000. We would, if we did tax, we would put that in a reserve somewhere and wait. Whenever the year the other party shows up and says they are ready to go, instead of borrowing 4.6, we'll probably be borrowing 3 because we'd have had that money. But the way we are treating it now is, yes, for planning purposes, we have to account for this in the future because you've made the commitment. But that target keeps moving depending on what information we have. And so we've made an assumption that, like Ms. Duncan is saying, the impact would be in 2019. I don't know what information we'd have when in 2018, when we do this exercise, this could be in 2021.
That explains it better for me. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Beswick.
Thanks, it helped me too. Victor, 2 questions, if I may. Did you indicate that we have $165 million in revenue for 2017?
Yes.
And did you indicate 133 in expenditures?
Yes.
And so for our annual operating, we have a $32 million surplus.
Okay, so this is where municipalities are a little bit confused in the way we account for things. So our revenue all comes through one door for both operating and capital. So the $165 million is revenue for both operating and capital. So you take 165 less the 132. The difference we transfer to fund the capital and reserves. So there's no surplus. It all comes in one way. All revenue comes, we count it for one, but then our expenses or expenditures are kind of like split into two, operating and capital. So if you were to conceptualize this, we are saying in 2017 we are going to have capital projects of $42 million, right? So if we took 165 less 132, that would give us 33, right? So that 33 flows into capital projects and reserves, and then we have to make up with grants and debt for the difference.
So in 2017, 33 plus the 9 gives us
the 42.
So 42. So we would only be borrowing, if at all, $9 million.
And as it sits now, I think we said in when we talked about our debt, so we have Wellcox for about $6 million, I think, and then about 5.2 out in sanitary sewer. Are those in 2017 or they're later? Okay.
Okay, thank you. And my last question then would be, in the 5-year plan, 2017 to 21, do we have any debt retirement of some of our major, in the next 5 years? Are we retiring any of our major facility debts?
Yes, we do. We just retired the $1 million, and I think we have the Aquatic Center as well in 2020.
2020, thank you. And thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. This is for Ms. Duncan. I think it was you, maybe it was Mr. Mima. You said that one of the reductions was as a result of the RCMP adjustment. Is that the recommended adjustment from 95% to 92%?
Yes.
Okay. So have we made that decision, or is that based on an expectation we will?
Let Mr. Mima answer.
So this is what we're recommending to you until you decide, which is next Monday. This is a recommendation from staff.
Okay. So that if we took it into our heads that we wanted to improve RCMP services, the numbers would then change.
The numbers will definitely change.
Okay, upwards, obviously.
Probably upwards.
Yeah.
This is what happens, right? Is the more you want, and if there's no alternative revenue source, you have to get money from somewhere.
So some of these reductions would be as a result of us either cutting service or deciding not to have a certain level of service.
So let's talk about RCMP, this model about RCMP. There is no cut in RCMP services contemplated at all. All we're simply saying is instead of the city continuing with this surplus of $1 million every year, we redirect that $1 million elsewhere.
Okay, maybe I should rephrase it. As a result of us deciding not to increase services to places like the RCMP, those are decisions we make at this table.
That's correct.
The RCMP asked for more officers, more resources, and they make their pitch, and we look at that and say no, and that results in the expenditure level.
So I think you have responded to RCMP somewhat. So last year I did make a recommendation that we utilize the reserve fund for 2 officers. And then I think you directed RCMP to come back to you with a servicing plan. And I think that's still being worked on. So you have responded.
Yes. When did we do that? Did we do that at the beginning when we were drafting this budget, or did we move through the year and then have some second thoughts about limiting our resources to the RCMP?
So at the time when we were discussing the budget, the conversation was you needed an updated service plan. And so time passed, and then I think in Q1, the issue was revisited as to what were the immediate needs. And they asked for, I think, was it 3, and you approved 2.
Right. So sometimes during the course of the year, and in fact during this past year, we added, was it about $1 million in spending to the budget? Didn't we last week approve a change to the you're smiling, so maybe I misunderstand it. No, so we made a change to the budget. Then we spent $1 million, I'm not sure, 2 or so, and we had to ratify that.
So,
additional expenditure.
So the way we approach budget amendments, and I think we noted it in our budget amendment report that we provided to you, is we have largely been moving money from projects that are completed to projects that are incomplete. So we are not creating new money. We're not depleting reserves. We're simply saying, okay, this project is done, this project needs more money, and we're moving money that way. So there's been, you only text once, so we would not be recommending that you keep, allocating money when you've only done one property tax bylaw in a year. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
A question with regards to the RCMP budgeting and reducing. Would it be safe to say that we've consistently over-budgeted for the RCMP contract, and the reduction would be more reflective of the actual budget for the RCMP? And if so, that it is more reflective of the actual budget, were there a need, we could at any time increase that budget.
So that's correct, and I captured this in an email yesterday, and I wish I could reread that email because I think it captured it well. Structurally, the way RCMP postings and other things work, it is rare that you use 100% of your establishment, and that has budget implications. So we are in a position where we've experienced these surpluses, we've put them away in a reserve. We have a model where we know as things sit today, where would the actual numbers sit? And that's what we're trying to respond to. But at the same time, we are very much sensitive to making sure the city remains flexible to respond if there is any change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Believe it or not, I see no further questions.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Curry.
I was just going to remind you, Your Worship, that there was a recess scheduled at 6:30, and if you wanted to, I just wanted
Correct.
to make
I'm seeing
sure.
3 different times here, so certainly if we could just do one more item, and that would be to receive the Advisory Committee Commission minutes for, this is number 8B, Special Open Parks Recreation Wellness Committee for September 21st. Moved by Councillor Yoakum, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to go into recess for 10 minutes. Thank God. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume the meeting. So the next item, if everyone could take their seats, please, concerns the extreme weather shelter for youth. And the purpose, Council is receiving a report tonight. The purpose is to provide an overview and recommendation for potential responses in the issue of emergency sheltering for homeless youth in Nanaimo. Mr. Horn, are you going to introduce this item?
Thank you to the Chair. Just to indicate that last week Council had a presentation regarding the incidence of youth homelessness in the community and directed staff to conduct a process to look at potential options in response to that and to come back with a report. So this report captures the discussions we've had to date on the idea of providing alternative shelter options for young people.
Thank you. And I see that there are a number of options available to us with a recommendation. That Council support the provision of additional winter shelter beds for homeless youth by partnering with either Tillicum Lalem at 477 10th Street or the Nanaimo 710 Club at 285 Prideaux Street to provide youth shelter beds and allocate a maximum budget of $75,000 from the Housing Legacy Reserve for the 2016-17 winter season. And is there a member of Council that's prepared to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Brennan. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. It's now on the table. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. In regards to the $75,000 coming from Legacy, was it Legacy Fund you said?
That's correct.
It'd be a good opportunity with the nonprofits and out there, see if we can get the match to increase that fund and maybe put some out there for agencies to match that for such an important cause. I think it'd be a good starting ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. The recommendation indicates either. So what is the recommendation, that we do either, or?
Currently, we're in negotiations with the relevant parties to see who can do what, where, and how. So those aren't completely concluded. So really, there's a couple of options that we're pursuing, and we'd like to find an end result in that. And really, we're seeking direction to continue going down those paths to see what we can do with whom and where. Because it's sort of preliminary at this point, we're putting out what's the likely options, and then we'll work with those providers to see if that's possible and even probable.
Supplemental, please. And a maximum budget, so that would suggest up to. So if we're negotiating with both because we think that both may be able to provide a service that is necessary, then I would not like to restrict it to either. I would like, if one organization can do 6 beds and the other can do 12, and yay, great. I wouldn't want to say, well, we're going to remove or eliminate the 6-bed one because we're just really going to negotiate with the 12 beds. Sorry for using those numbers, but I would rather we open it to allow for up to $75,000 for staff to provide as many beds as possible in however many locations you determine appropriate for up to that amount of money, and not be restrictive with this. I'd rather it be open, personally, and then negotiations. Is this sooner rather than later? Like, is this a soon thing? Like, are we negotiating tomorrow morning after we approve this?
Yeah.
So that we have an answer by tomorrow night?
I'm not sure I can get an answer that fast, but the goal is to proceed as quickly as possible. That's really the ultimate goal, to put in place something as soon as possible for this winter and as soon as we can in the most practical way.
So, thank you. Supplemental again then. So help me out with as soon as we can. Like, what does that look like, as soon as we can? A week?
I think the constraints are pretty much hiring the staff and putting them in place, the time frame required to do that. And that'll differ a little bit depending on who's doing the hiring. The second constraint would be we'd need the support of both the Ministry of Children and Family Development and licensing to move forward on certain locations. So that's another consideration. I don't know what time frame they're going to take to confirm and approve these sort of things. So we do have to work with those partners, and we don't have certainty as to what processes they need to go through and how long they're going to take. My goal would be that we would be able to move forward in a way that the outcome would be that we would want to start identifying and hiring staff right away and kind of compose it down to a 2-week turnaround. That would be my ultimate goal. Whether we can achieve that or not, we'll see, but about 2 weeks is what my hope would be. You could have something up and running.
Sorry, I just have to. My apologies to everyone. But then by being restrictive with Tillicum Lalem or 710 Club, then are we bound to MCFD and all of the other agencies when in fact just hypothetically, and I don't know, so pardon my ignorance, so the Unitarian, for example, and I know that they don't have assumedly the space for youth, and you can't mix youth with adults, so that part I get. But if we are constricted in time because we have to go through all of the hoops and hurdles for hiring and qualifications and all that stuff, aren't we really trying to provide shelter for these kids that are on the street as quickly as possible? And if that is our end goal, then why would we want this to stretch out 2 or 3 weeks? Because I can't imagine over the Christmas holiday, 2 weeks is December 31st. I just can't imagine a whole lot getting done. And I hope that it does, because I'd like it to happen tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, and I understand bureaucracy and all that, so how do we commit $75,000 for fall and winter cold weather shelter for youth and not have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to implement it?
I think it's really going to be at the partners, the capacity of the partners to identify and bring on board staff. So it may be improper for me to speak as to how long it would take the Tillicum Lalem Association to identify staff and bring them on stream. They may have staff already in their organization who can do this, who can take on the extra hours. Similarly with the Unitarian Church, again, they may have staff that they can draw upon already who could be ready in no time flat. So I wouldn't wish to speak for them how quickly they can move on this, but that's the kind of discussions we're having with them now. So they may be able to move faster than that. And again, I'm not inside their organizations, so I'm not sure how quick it's going to take, how long it's going to take for them to identify and put in place staff. The one comment I would make is if you put it into 2 different places, you're going to have to double the amount of staff, because it's 2 staff on the entire time. Regardless of whether it's 6 beds or 12, you're still going to need 2 staff. So if we have one place that takes 6 beds and another place that takes 6 beds, we'll need 4 staff to operate that. So that doubles the number. So we are looking at 1 facility, because that right now, 2 staff is the minimum you'll need to conduct this sort of thing, and also happens to be the maximum because you have 12 beds proposed. So that's the only difficulty. We'd basically go from 75,000 to a bigger number, probably 140, to do it in 2 places. So we'd prefer to do it in 1 because it's going to give us the ability to move faster. But if it came down to it, we could come back with a different proposal if that was what was on the table. But it doesn't seem to be a shortage of number of beds. That hasn't been debated by the partners we're talking to. They're happy to do 12. That's a number they're comfortable with 2 staff. Any bigger, they would start to have to need more staff. But any smaller, and they're not going to be really doing much efficiency sort of things.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Councillor Fuller.
Okay. So most people know that I'm the chair of the 710 Club Society. Met with John Horn today. 710 Club does not benefit anything from this. So for those out there who are going to come back at me with a conflict of freaking interest thing, there is none. There's absolutely none. 710 Club benefits no way, period. The 710 Club is not the ideal location, and we discussed this today. It would be temporary at best until things could get organized, perhaps with Tillicum Lalem. If Tillicum can't accommodate it this year, it could be done at the 710 Club. It's likely a quicker temporary fix. And I say temporary because we would need something better than that for future years. This is just temporary. So if we could, given the right, if everything works out, we could have it ready by Christmas. It's just a simple matter of getting the mats, et cetera, that I actually heard Kwame Laylam might be interested in providing cots, et cetera. Those all could be moved once, if Tillicum Laylam comes on board, those could be moved to Tillicum. In the meantime, we could utilize part-time staff or staff from Tillicum, possibly from another organization that also has casual staff. So the staffing part is relatively easy to do as well. But don't get me wrong here. 710 Club would be an immediate temporary thing, not permanent by any means and not meant to be, preferably as short a term as possible. But if we are looking at doing this as quickly as possible, and we're looking at doing it this year, this is why you have both on this thing. It's not one or the other, because chances are we could get them into the 710 Club, utilize that space. As I say, it's not ideal until Tillicum could come on board, or some other agency if Tillicum can't. But it would be temporary at best. But could be done quickest and easiest.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that information, Gord. We want to get this done as quickly as possible, and I understand that there's frustration with any bureaucracy and so on, and I get that. But we want to move and take some action as quickly as we possibly can. I do want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Horn and staff and Councillor Fuller and Councillor Brennan for their very quick response on this issue from just 1 week ago. And you've obviously got some options laid out, and it sounds like they're good ones, even if they are temporary. But there's something to make a start with. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we can move it ahead quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I was at the meeting last Wednesday, I guess it was, and most of the players were there. Most of the players recognized the urgency, and most of the players were optimistic that this could be done in fairly quick order. Unfortunately, the one option that we thought would work well turned out just not to be big enough, and so that wasn't going to work. But I've worked with Mr. Horn, I don't know, 10, 12 years now, and I have a lot of confidence in his ability to work this through in as quickly a fashion as can be done and find the best solution as well. And maybe we should leave that up to Mr. Horn to work his magic, and he has excellent relationships with all the social service providers in our city, and as I say, I'm confident that we can get this done, and that he will bring back to us the best choice that can be made in this. They're limited, but there are solutions. It was quite clear when we sat down. There are solutions, and that we can meet the needs of these young people. So, thank you, Mr. Horn, for the work you did so quickly to put that together. That was entirely on your shoulders, and you did an excellent job. Continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I think we put the right people in charge of doing this, and certainly Mr. Horn, as Councillor Brennan has said, has wonderful resources, and of course Councillor Fuller as well. Councillor Brennan, both have worked in these areas in our community for many years. and been involved in different initiatives. So I have full confidence that this will get done as quickly as it can. I think Mr. Horns heard that message, and I think he'll probably do everything he can to make that happen, along with the help of whoever else is needed. So I'd like to call the question.
Thank you. And we're going to call a question. On the motion that's on the floor, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have been moving quickly over the last week to try to bring this report back to you, and I'm pleased this evening. I think one of the key hurdles was identifying funding, again, as was mentioned, for a short-term or in-term solution. As a second part, then, based on Council's recommendation, I think there's a second part that maybe Council may wish to consider tonight, and that would be referring the issue of youth homelessness, including the establishment of a long-term extreme weather shelter for youth, to the Community Vitality Committee.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing that, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Lindsay for that. I know that there was a sense at the committee, among some of the committee members, that this was an opportunity for the social planning part of that committee to have some work and do some good work. So I know that they will appreciate this.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, it's like option 3 was one of the things we had talked about. I think we forgot because we're moving this forward. I think it's important that we look at the long term and possibly a new facility and the ability to maybe deal with some of our other issues like the gender specific or any of those things where women could be moved to a shelter, with youth moved to a shelter in this area. I think a new building would be a phenomenal thing. So I hope that can come out of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I was wondering if we can also add the Youth Advisory Council to this with regards to youth initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is under notice of motion. Ms. Greer, you're going to have to help me with this, and that is that there seemed to be a misunderstanding from the last meeting as to whether or not the notice of motion came forward. But based on the delegation of the authority of the Committee of the Whole, can this motion be heard, or is it only a notice of motion tonight?
We took it as only a notice of motion tonight to be then dealt with under other business at the next council meeting next week on December the 19th.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So, there's no requirement there for a motion. Next one is under delegations, under item 13. Now, I'd like to ask council for their indulgence. We actually have Mr. Darren Moss and Ms. Jana Zielinski who wish to present with respect to the TN Reimagined. And the others, we have 1, 2, 3 other speakers that wish to act as delegations. So there's some thought that they would be reduced to 5 minutes each. And if it's beg council's indulgence to allow Mr. Moss and Ms. Zielinski to carry on with their 10-minute presentations. That's what they prepared for. Is there any issue with that from council? Okay, fine. Based on concurrence, we'll allow 10 minutes each. And the other delegations, 5 minutes. See you, Kenny.
I had the pleasure of chairing the TN Reimagined Committee over the last year and a half. And today myself and Jana are here to give a quick summary of the process we had with the public over the last year and a half, a brief introduction to the final plan, and leave you with a couple of recommended action steps for your consideration. So thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for the extension. Tough to squeeze a year and a half into 10 minutes. So, a quick summary of how we got here. The TN Reimagined Committee was formed back in July 2015. It's a community-led committee, it's a technical steering committee that was funded by a mixture of the City of Nanaimo, NEDC, DNBIA, with funding from Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure at the same time. The goals of this committee were to lead a public engagement process across the City of Nanaimo to determine what the city's goals were for the Terminal Nickel Corridor into the future. Once we had a good sense of these, it was also to balance those goals against the real physical and technical constraints that exist along this corridor to develop a phased action plan that would allow us to take bite-sized steps towards the implementation of this vision. We added a couple rounds of community engagement along the way that we updated you on, and that extended the schedule. Despite those, we were able to finish the project on budget as presented to Council back in 2015. Why is Terminal Nickel so important? Terminal Nickel is the southern gateway to our city. It's the first impression that all of our visitors get, and it's the reinforcement of the existing condition for all of our residents who use this corridor every day. Over the last year and a half, the word we've heard most resoundingly to describe the current state of the corridor is embarrassing. There's none of the people that came out to our public events that said, "This represents my pride in Nanaimo, how I see Nanaimo." So Terminal Nickel Reimagined is aimed at trying to develop bite-sized steps, like I said, to get us to where we can be proud of this corridor and to where it reflects what Nanaimo has to offer. The idea is to encourage our guests to stop and our residents to step back and enjoy the service that Nanaimo has to offer and really stop and appreciate rather than speeding up and getting through. Nanaimo is not the only city in BC or North America to have this challenge. To have a major roadway that sort of bisects your city is a pretty common condition. Where Nanaimo stands apart a little bit is in some of the opportunities we have to reassess this. With the creation of the bypass, there really is a viable alternative to Terminal Nickel if you're not to get to major stopping points along north-south in Nanaimo. That's really afforded the option to reimagine how this corridor can function. The next big advantage we have is, despite sort of a troubled past, there is renewed interest in redevelopment along this corridor. There's some big land accumulations happening, some very challenging fires that have happened. There's going to be redevelopment along the corridor in the next couple of years. And this is our chance to get ahead of that development, to make sure that development takes us forward and doesn't keep the status quo. For better or worse, some of the infrastructure along the corridor is aging. The pavement is scheduled on Ministry of Transportation's repaving schedule, and there's some infrastructure in the ground below that needs help. And I believe those projects are actually scheduled for the next few years as well. Being able to take advantage of the heavy costs of those improvements by realigning curbs and islands to make sure we're making steps toward the future is a wonderful way to use those as step forwards. The last but not the least, by any means, is the amount of energy and momentum that has been discovered in the community about this. The community wants to be proud of that corridor and introduce Nanaimo to all of its visitors. From South End Community Association, who had the grassroots thing, My Street, that started this whole process, to all of the people who came out and supported us through all the public events. Though visions differed a little bit, everybody wants to see this corridor change to represent and be a showcase of what Nanaimo can do. As you all know, we have a ton of great documents that have explored what the building form should be up and down this corridor. We didn't try to reassess those as part of this project. What we tried to do was develop a toolbox of ideas that would help us get to them. So that's really what TN Reimagined is about. It's not about revisiting what the building or uses should be. It's about how do we get there. That's critically important when you look at what we're talking about today. We're talking about number 1, Port Drive, possible fast ferries, possible upgrades to the RDN Transit Exchange, and perhaps some kind of a multiplex or event center. This corridor will be the front door to all of those projects, and we want to make sure we get it right. So, as to make good on the first goal, we had 4 major public engagement events of varying types, varying sizes. With our good successes, we had great discussions, and we were able to get over 500 points of input into the plan at varying stages, and we were able to adapt the plan to suit that input. We think we've done a good job of listening and being transparent, and we've had some great conversations. So plan you're going to be presented with tonight is a summary of that input. What we heard, unfortunately, the greatest fear we heard didn't vary from day one, is that Terminal Nickel will be the same in 20 years as it is today. I don't think that it's unusual to expect to see that. It's a very complex piece of roadway from ownership to constraints, and change along it's not going to be easy. So that was, from the start to finish, the biggest fear we heard. Other key feedback: greening, beautification, pedestrian amenities, everyone loves them, not a big surprise. Desirable economic development, again, no one's against that. Number of vehicle lanes, that was a point of discussion from day one right through to the end, and there is no magic answer to that one. After much deliberation and discussion, what you're going to see tonight is the committee's recommendation. It is that we maintain the potential for 4 lanes into the future. There's some creative ways to use those lanes as traffic needs changed either during time of day or into the future, but we didn't feel it was what the best idea for our city to limit that to 2 lanes full time, given what we learned on the traffic side. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jana. She's going to give you guys a bit of an introduction and a run through of the plan, and then I'll be back to talk about implementation at the end.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, everyone. So as Darren mentioned, there has been a wealth of visioning and imagining about what the future of Terminal Nickel could be. And so the intent of Terminal Nickel Reimagined really is to think about how those visions can be achieved. This process provided us an opportunity to look very closely at what the community visions could be, and then balance that against the constraints of the corridor, and come up with workable, implementable solutions for moving forward. So as Darren mentioned, what we've really done is structured TN Reimagined into a toolbox. And this document includes a range of potential tools. We're calling them components in the plan. But the idea is that each of these tools could contribute to a stronger, more resilient, more attractive Terminal Nickel. It's structured in a way that partners could use a few of the tools, you could use all of the tools. It's bringing together those various pieces so that as the area evolves over time, the toolbox can continue to be used. So just a little bit about the study area. It includes Nickel Street and Terminal Avenue, starting from the south end near the Days Inn, place called South Street. And it continues all the way along Nickel Street to Esplanade, and then Terminal Avenue up to Comox Front. And there's 3 numbers up there, and that's because the corridor changes quite a lot as you move through it. Segment 1 is the more residential area, the South Street to Farquhar. Segment 2 is the commercial part of Nickel Street, and segment 3 from Esplanade to Comox is the Terminal Avenue commercial area. So during the process, we heard a lot about some of the key considerations people wanted to see in Terminal Nickel. And these recurring themes were distilled into the 4 principles that you see there. The concepts for Terminal Nickel all strive to respond to these principles. So our city's gateway speaks to the experience we want people having when they're coming into our city and encouraging them to move and explore further into what this city has to offer. Safe for Everyone speaks to the experience we want people to have as they enter, and they want to have a shared space where cars and people and transit and bikes all can coexist. It also means creating a space that feels safe, someplace that you can feel good to be day or night. Vibrant Main Street is about encouraging businesses to thrive, having filled up shop fronts, making sure there's places that people can go and enjoy. And finally, Keep on Moving. Terminal Nickel is an important part of Nanaimo's traffic network. We need to maintain access into the downtown, to the port, to the ferries, all of those components. It needs to continue to work for vehicles, but it also has to work better for all the modes of transportation. So based on these principles, Terminal Nickel Reimagined has developed approaches for 5 key components of the corridor: vehicle traffic, pedestrian realm, cycling, transit, and future development. I'll talk briefly about each of these 5 things. So in terms of a proposed approach to vehicle traffic, when we started this project, there was a big question that needed to be answered. Can and should Terminal Nickel be a 2-lane rather than a 4-lane street? We heard a very wide range of opinions on this, from yes, it should be 2-lane and we need that space for all the other modes of transportation, to concerns that we're going to slow traffic to a point where people aren't going to want to come into the downtown anymore. We did study this question from a technical perspective, so we had a chance to look at current traffic volumes and projections into the future. Based on current traffic counts, there's about 940 vehicles that come through that corridor during peak times. So that's the people going to and from work on a busy weekday. During other times, those traffic counts are considerably lower. 900 vehicles per hour is around the maximum account for 2 travel lanes. So based on current counts, reducing to 2 lanes could be technically feasible in the short term, but this change would have a significant change to the corridor. Traffic would take about 30% longer to move through it, and if that traffic counts continued to increase, it would continue to exacerbate that. However, current traffic volumes also show us that during non-peak travel times, which is the majority of the time in the corridor, traffic counts are much lower, and the 2-lane configuration could work. Based on this information, Terminal Nickel Reimagined recommends maintaining the 4-lane vehicle cross-section in order to maintain flexibility into the future. Maintaining the 4 lanes provides the opportunity to reassess traffic demands 5, 10, 15 years down the line and continue to make decisions, because there could be a time in the road where 2 lanes might be more feasible for a permanent solution with on-street parking, or there could be greater demand and more needs for longer periods of time for the 4 lanes to keep traffic moving. In the short term, as part of the TN Reimagined project and moving towards that more multimodal corridor, the plan does recommend that the curb line be considered for time-of-day parking during off-peak times. Having this would create parking conveniently in front of the businesses. It would help slow traffic moving through the corridor, and it would keep a buffer between moving traffic and the people using the sidewalk areas. Time-of-day parking is low cost to implement, it's easy to adjust, but it's a big change. It would very much change the way that the corridor is being used today. The plan also recommends introducing a series of traffic calming elements, including more trees, curb extensions on cross streets, central medians, and more crosswalks, all in the intent of trying to create a better balance between all the modes of transportation. So the approach that Terminal Nickel Reimagined is putting forward is one that keeps traffic moving, but in a way that encourages other modes to thrive as well. And the goal for the pedestrian realm is to have a street with people. On October 29th, we had our last public event for Terminal Nickel Reimagined, and it was coincidentally the same day as the Halloween Howl. And if anybody went down there on that day, you saw Commercial Street, and it was jam-packed with people. It was amazing. It was everything that we'd want our downtown to be. And a lot of people felt really inspired in that and saying, yes, we can build on that and continue to move that up and down Terminal Nickel. So a key element for the pedestrian approach is to break down the barriers in creating an interconnected pedestrian network. Urban planning tells us that people don't like walking long blocks. They like short blocks. They like to be able to navigate to where they need to go. When they get too long, they're tiresome. People decide to drive instead. So today, Terminal Nickel has some very seriously long blocks. If you go to stand at the corner of Wentworth Street, you'll have to walk 400 meters in either direction to get to a crosswalk if you want to visit a business on the other side. And so as a result, pedestrians do one of 3 things. They use their car, they jaywalk, or they avoid the area altogether, none of which fits with the idea of having Terminal Nickel Reimagined as a pedestrian-oriented streetscape. Today, the study area is about 2.5 kilometers long, and we've got 6 pedestrian crossings through there. What the plan recommends is adding or considering adding an additional 6, so that you have that permeability and the ability to walk to a variety of destinations and businesses. And in addition to crossing the corridor, it also looks at creating better connections between Terminal and places like Wallace and places like Victoria Street and Commercial Street. So the idea is that if you wanted to visit the Old City Quarter, Nickel Street, and downtown, you wouldn't want to get in your car to do it. There'd be an easy way to get there on foot. The plan also envisions expanding the pedestrian areas so that when you have a pedestrian area, you have room like you see in the picture. Places for sidewalk cafes, bike parking, street trees, all the things that create that life in the corridor that make people want to spend time there. That's a key element of building that into the plan going forward. In terms of cycling, it's an increasingly popular mode of transportation in Nanaimo. And however, we recognized during the planning process there's a lot of limitations to cycling on Terminal Nickel, including there's narrow lanes, fairly fast-moving traffic, narrow right-of-way, and introducing time-of-day parking complicates that further. So the upside with Nickel Street is that there is a strong parallel network in Victoria and in Haliburton, which was recognized as cycling routes in the South End neighborhood plan. And so the plan supports continuing to build on that and making sure that those routes can tie back into Nickel Street. Terminal is a bit more complicated. It doesn't have that same strong parallel network, but it does have a wider right-of-way. So what the plan reimagines is actually having integrated cycling as a bike path, separated from vehicles, separated from the sidewalk, moving through Terminal Avenue and connecting up to the larger bike network. Today, transit currently operates on the parallel streets to Terminal Nickel. So it'll go up Victoria and back on Halliburton in a loop. And that's okay, but part of thinking about an overall plan for the entire corridor, having transit there is an important part of an active area. It brings people straight into the area. It encourages them to visit the businesses. It helps create the positive activity in the eyes on the street that we're hoping to see. So the plan does recommend reintegrating regular transit on Nanaimo and supporting potentially future rapid transit if it should go forth on the street as well. Bus stops would work well with the time of day parking, and it would continue to help along with the traffic calming. A key component of this, however, is making sure that the areas dedicated to this are high quality, they're well lit, people feel safe, they feel good, and they add to the overall character of the corridor. And finally, development. So high quality development is central to revitalization. New buildings last a really long time. Having a new building that comes in that adds and continues to build on that is a huge asset. Having a building that detracts has a lot of potential to slow that momentum. And so wanting to make sure that any development that's going forward is well thought through and really fitting with the vision for the area is a key part of the plan. And really a lot of the planning for the area, like the South End Neighborhood Plan, the downtown planning, that's what they tell us. They tell us we want mixed use, active retail, more residential in the area. This plan wants to support that. And so in order to do that, it recommends taking a really close look at different guidelines, policies, making sure that there's strong development guidelines in place so that when development comes forward, it's always contributing to that overall vision. And a big part of that's going to be rebuilding the relationship between buildings and the street. Right now, there's a bit of a disconnect there. We've got parking lots in front, we've got chain link fences, we've got boarded up windows. There's a lot of things that make it a place that isn't great for a pedestrian to be. And so the plan really recommends bringing all of those pieces together and creating high quality spaces that invite people in, show clear entrances, show the detail, and make it a pleasant place to be in the future.
Yes, Evan, for a second. So being cognizant of the time for everybody, we have a section coming up that introduces the improvement concepts and stuff, but it probably takes an extra 7 minutes. We'd love to show it to you guys, but I wanted to make sure we check because we're already nearing the end of our time, and we do want to do the implementation piece as well. So quick question to council, whether we can proceed. So it'd probably be closer to like 27 minutes instead of the 20 minutes. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for keeping an eye on the time. So in terms of the improvement concepts, I'll go through these fairly quickly, but the idea is that we wanted to understand what these ideas and these approaches would look like on the ground. And so Terminal Nickel Reimagined is about advancing them, moving them forward. So what you'll find in the plan is a series of plans and series of sections that try to describe where the various changes could be. So in the plan that you're seeing on the screen, there's one of these for each of the 3 segments. And what it has is a set of strategies and components that are tailored to improving that particular segment. The green circles indicate the various components that could be considered for that segment. And in the plan, there's a lot more detail about what's intended to achieve, the rationale behind it, some of the potential challenge that could be faced when implementing it, as well as having a set of actions and preliminary cost estimating to help with the planning process. Each of the 3 segments also has a set of sections that look like this. And they really are intended to show the relationship between the street, the pedestrian area, and the development, both today, which is what you're seeing in the upper drawing, and in the future was what you're seeing in the lower drawing. And the intent there is to talk about what can change in the short term versus how things are going to change a little bit in the long term as the redevelopment occurs. So with that, I will talk very briefly about the 3 segments and introduce some of the key concepts for them. Segment 1, this is our South Street to Farquhar section, and this is our south entry. And so really what this area is focused on is creating a gateway and creating an entry into the city of Nanaimo that makes a lot of sense. It's about improving the visitor's first impression and includes elements like having a better tree network, replacing some of the fencing that doesn't work very well along there, improving the gateway component, and having a gateway feature at the front end. New pedestrian crossings are a key part of this component, making the area a lot more navigable for both pedestrians and cyclists. Segment 2, this is where our corridor transitions to more of commercial land uses and improvements focus on creating a more walkable, High Street for the South End community. Proposed improvements for this area include the time of day parking. They want to support businesses to being successful in the area. And they have a lot of focus on improvements to the pedestrian realm, like street trees, pedestrian-oriented lighting, and street furnishings. Future development is also oriented in a way that you would be able to access parking, off-street parking from behind on lanes or side streets, keeping the front and being able to build on creating a stronger relationship between the street and the sidewalk. And last but not least, located in the heart of downtown, segment 3 today is generally more of an auto-oriented commercial area with a lot of surface parking. The downtown design guidelines envision this area as a pedestrian-friendly mixed-use area with ground floor retail and living above. So time of day parking, crosswalks at Bastion Bridge, Wentworth, and Campbell Street, and a separated bike path are key to making this a much more inclusive and interesting area. Treed medians and boulevards are a key component of this, so we can start introducing the green that is pretty much devoid through this area altogether. And this particular segment has been identified by MOTI as a short-term priority for potential repaving. So there's some exciting opportunities in this area to think about efficiencies and moving this one forward in a way that could happen in an integrated manner. I'll pass it back to Darren.
Thanks, Sharon. Implementation. So as we've mentioned a couple of times, TN Reimagine provides project partners with a list of components. It's a lengthy list of options to try to allow them to align the bite-sized steps with the mood of the day. We don't believe this is a one-year project. We know how much time it will take to implement and get there. So we wanted to make sure it's flexible in the long term, and as priorities change, the plan can change with it. To help kind of narrow down those priorities, we created something called implementation packages. So again, the recommendations, more just to make it easier to understand how these relate one to another. And so I'm going to walk through how we set those up, but we're not going to get into each individual piece because it'll be a fairly detailed discussion. So the information package is a group of projects or a single project that is related to 4 components. The first of them is a critical trigger. So there's items and there's components to this project that if they aren't done ahead of something else, they become very difficult to do. Good examples would be if we want to realign the sidewalks with the buildings and we let a big development go ahead without it, it becomes just about impossible to get a continuous sidewalk line for the next 40 years. If we repave but don't catch the recurbing, it's going to be very difficult to find the money to repave again inside of 5-10 years. Related components. Sometimes there's components that you could do one component, but if you did 3, we believe you get a much stronger effect. An example would be time of day parking and crosswalks. The idea of time of day parking is to get people to get out of their cars and walk. If we don't improve the crossing, it doesn't really have the same ability to create the impact. Prerequisites, there's things that need to happen before some things can happen. The best example is the functional design we'll talk about next. If the functional design isn't done, the partners aren't in a position where they can actually move to get ahead of development or any projects. The last item that each package has is a preliminary high-level budget. Knowing that it's important to be able to plan for these things, we've worked at a high level, kind of a Class D level, to make sure that you have some sense of what the different components and packages would cost. So TN Reimagined has been an exciting process and been a lot of fun to be involved with. It's been very collaborative. We've had a lot of good discussions with project partners, stakeholders, most of the key players in town we thought we should be talking to. And it's been enjoyable because I think we've got to a place where we could say we have support from all our partners for the components we're proposing. The goal of our process was to provide our decision makers and partners with the ability to implement with the confidence that all components have been run by the community and it has community support. I think for the most part we're there. We'll never have 100%, but I believe we've done a good job of getting us there. As TN Reimagine finishes up its mandate, we're passing the torch on to yourselves as our community leaders. There are multiple partners to this, but it'll be City Council that needs to play the lead in this moving forward. Otherwise, I believe we'll find that it'll stall out again. So to help you guys on that mission, that trail to success, we've put this together to be flexible, as we mentioned, and hopefully give the best chance of success into the future. The next slide presents 2 action items for you guys to consider. to try to keep ahead of the changes that are coming our way in the next 2 years. The first one is to direct staff to undertake Component A, which is a city policy, plan, and bylaw review. The idea behind this is we have some wonderful documents out there that we were talking about earlier. The South End Community Downtown Development Guidelines or South End Community Plan. They all speak to wonderful concepts, and we tried to align with them where they made sense, but we know there's discrepancies. So the idea behind this is to make sure staff has a chance to absorb the plan, weigh it against the existing planning documents, and make sure they have a consistent voice to take forward to developers, and to come back to you and report with ideas of what should be implemented, what shouldn't. The second one's a little more interesting. We're asking you to consider directing staff to begin discussions with Ministry of Transportation and Highways to prepare terms of reference to complete Component B, which is the functional design. This plan stayed high level, and it tried to deal with a very long corridor. The next step in this is a little more detailed functional design where you can actually lay out lane widths, do traffic counts, and get the drawings to a point where they can be priced at a higher level of certainty and make sure that the technical solutions are well thought out. Ministry of Transportation is on side with this step. They are willing to stay on as a project partner, but the lead needs to come from us. It's a difficult ownership, as you guys have talked about before, and we all know, but I believe that if you guys take the lead and move with this, they're ready to talk and ready to participate. So those are the two asks. Like I say, it's been a very fun project. It's been great to have Jana and Lanark on side with all their technical background. Wonderful support from some of the community and great discussions, and good discussions with yourselves as well. So we hope you guys find the plan very useful, and then we really, truly hope you're able to make use of it to take us into a new vision for Terminal Nickel into the future. So we're here for any questions or comments you might have, and if the committee can be of help as you guys work through this, we're happy to come back and answer questions in the future as well.
Thank you. Questions for the presenters? Oh, just about. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Darren and Jana. I was pleased to take part in the October public event, and I thought it was very well attended, very well organized, and a lot of enthusiasm. And I personally feel that the South End Gateway is a crucial part of our city's future development. What I like about what you've done is that you're not saying we need to throw millions of dollars against something right now. You're saying let's create a vision of where we want to go in the future, and when opportunities arise to complete chunks of that, then we know where we want to be. Keep your eye on the prize as we move forward. And I'm really encouraged that the Ministry of Transportation is involved in support of your game plan as well. So thank you for your work. I find it very exciting. I know there's other delegations tonight, and I'm curious to hear what they have to say, but thank you. I think it's great work.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you as well. This is a tremendous amount of work, has taken a lot of the time of a lot of people in the community who are very, very passionate and enthusiastic about this. I too believe that this corridor is really crucial to whatever we do in the future, as it brings people into our community and as we start adding components to the downtown area that will bring more people down here. And of course, we have some pieces of property right now that, due to fire, because they're abandoned buildings at the moment, nobody's using them. These are all pieces of property that planning has to happen, and we certainly want that planning to fit with what the city itself has a vision for in the future. So I think the two go hand in hand very well, and I think your suggestion of, as opportunities come up, making sure that they fit with what that overall plan is, and that's going to take a little more, that's going to take a fair amount of work, and it's going to take some work on the part of our staff, and I'm assuming that people will be able to be drawn into that as well with staff to move it forward. I hope so anyway. But thank you for all the hard work that you have done and being as dedicated as you have been to this project, because it is an important project to our city. And this part of the city is so beautiful, and that's a piece of it that's not as beautiful as it should be. And we want it to be beautiful. We want everybody to be proud of that. So thank you for getting us this far.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Councillor Brennan.
I'm not going to say all of the great things that you've brought to us tonight, because they are, and I don't think they need any further embellishment. But I did want to thank you and everyone that worked on the committee. It's been a long time, getting close to 1.5 years, I think. And for everyone to stay dedicated and stay working on this and then coming up with this plan, I think you really deserve our thanks and our admiration. So to everybody, thanks.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegations. Councillor Brennan? Yeah. Councillor Pratt? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. To our IT technician, can you hold this for the future? I think there's somebody else coming up with a presentation, but they have an audio-visual as well. So the next delegation is Ms. Sandy McClellan. Mr.
Yes, it is Mr.
That's the second time this meeting we've had that. We had a
I know these Scottish names.
Thank you, Mr. McClellan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and those assembled. My name is Sandy McClellan. I am the chairman of the South End Community Association. I am here today on behalf of the South End Community Association to speak of our support for the Terminal Nickel Reimagined endeavor. Our membership, as well as the greater South End community, has been participating in a series of public consultations and displays, and even a mock High Street afternoon, which transformed a section of Nickel into a community shopping and services street that our community has hoped and dreamed it could one day be. The ideas put forth not only has the potential to give the South End a pedestrian-friendly shopping, entertainment, and service-oriented Main Street, it also has the potential to provide a lively, attractive southern gateway to our city. Many of the ideas are very inexpensive to implement, such as the time of day, street parking, which would have the effect of providing business-friendly environment for potential tenants of the many empty and underutilized retail office space along Nickel. New businesses bring people, bring employment, vitality, and a sense of a healthy community. SECA is excited about the transformable effects these recommendations have, the potential to provide our neighborhood, as well as the first impressions it would provide to those that will enter our community from its southern sector. What we currently have is not working, and the evidence is there for all to see. It's time for a change, and it's time for us to bring the Terminal Nickel Street corridor up to the potential we know it has. Let's give our neighbors, our city, ourselves, the lively, dynamic, pedestrian-oriented thoroughfare that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. If you could hold your applause, please. Okay, so the next one is motion to receive the delegation, please. By Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Leo Boone.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Representing Greater Nanaimo Cycling Coalition and the BC Cycling Coalition. I must say I had a couple opportunities to be at the open houses, and great work by both Jana and Darren and all the volunteers. So I have no qualms about it that they worked diligently on that. However, we have a number of concerns. Our major concern is which really comes back to the proponent on the critical trigger is the width of the roads that are suggested in the proposal. So currently the roads are between, the lanes are on the roads are between 3.4 and 3.5 meter wide, which is really designed for roads that at high speed. And the sidewalks are about, well, depending on where you are, 2 meters, meter and a half, 2.5 meters. This beautiful plan is not really making any changes to that. So we can make it and dress it up as nice as we can be. It is not going to change, A, the behavior of the drivers, or it's going to increase our economic situation the way it is. So, not the fault of Ms. Jana or Darren, like we have a systemic problem, and that's our own Minister of Transportation. The lane width that we are using is really way too wide. We could reduce that to 3.3 meter. In fact, almost all cities now are reducing it to 3 meter. And even if you drive a Hummer with the mirrors fully out, it's only 2.8 meters. Okay, you're not taking any more road. A bus, 3 meters. It's actually 2 meters and 98 centimeters, but let's call it 3 meters. Evenly at 3.3 meters, you can do that. So that gives you another 80 centimeters to use as a sidewalk. Secondly, if we really are serious about reducing the amount of trips that people take in this city, 180,000 every day, okay, and I invite you to come and sit with me right here in front of TD Bank. I'll present you with coffee and a chair and a seat, and a table, and you can just watch how many people come. 1 car, 1 driver, every morning, and we'll do the same on the top of Departure Bay Road, okay? That's the behavior that we need to change. And we don't do that by keeping 4 lanes. So you have to reduce the lanes. I'm all in favor of putting parking there. So, as you are aware, we have a master transportation plan, and those elements are all in there. And our engineers, who have been working on this diligently, the folks who design our roads, have discovered through research that if you reduce the lanes, people actually change their behavior. They've done tests, they've done research, and we discovered that, hey, people actually are changing their behavior. And that's really what traffic is. It is, influencing the behavior of people, how they actually move. Because if we don't get them to slow down from 70, what they're doing now at Nickel, you can put all the crosswalks you want. We've had people here on crosswalk killed. Whether it was a light flashing or not, doesn't matter. People are driving too fast. So you need to change the behavior. So, the same engineer also learned that when we use these traffic calming techniques, and when we are reducing those lanes, that we see less congestion, not more congestion. People think because we're going slower, we actually are creating congestion, but we're not. We're actually reducing congestion because people move faster at 40 kilometers an hour right through town than they are at 70 kilometers because they're stopping at every light because that's where they come to. They come to the next light. They come to the next light. So we can change that behavior. If we do not reduce the lane width from 3.5, so you have to remember 3.5 times 4, okay, so that's 14 meters. That's over 50 feet. So imagine walking across this road, Nickel Road or Terminal, 50 feet as a pedestrian. That is a risky behavior, especially if we do not slow the traffic down. So our recommendation is yes, great. I would love to see all of these beautiful things that are in this plan. But we need to start with the first thing, is we need to reduce the width of the lanes. That means really negotiating right there with MOTI, okay, that's your component B, and say, can we reduce these lanes? Can we make the sidewalks wider so that we see more economic benefits? We see more people walking. Also, the sidewalks that we have now, which we are keeping the way it is, are not wide enough for wheelchair, are not wide enough for mobility scooters. Okay, there's lots of areas where we have issues with that because we have newspaper boxes there. We have, if we have parking, we have all the poles for the parking, etc., etc., etc. So we need to do that. And also, if we reduce those people driving, people have a 7 to 9 time chance to die when they get hit at 50 than they are at 30 kilometers an hour. So we want to have people the opportunity to feel safe in our community with this great plan. But we need to start at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions.
All right. Thank you very much.
Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is Mr. Tim McGrath.
Good evening, Council. My name's Tim McGrath, 431 3rd. I'm here to ask City Council to give serious consideration before going anywhere with this plan. The difficulty that we're faced with is the city has a neighborhood community plans system set up. We've done some of the city. In particular, we've done the South End. Now we're taking, before that is fully implemented, we're now taking a kick at another cat. Reducing traffic into the downtown core will kill the downtown core, plain and simple. You slow it down, you're talking, everybody's standing here saying, well, this is our first impression, And the first impression is going to be a traffic jam, plain and simple. People are going to come off the highway, they're going to see the traffic, they're going to say, I'm not going through this. And they'll try to find the fastest way out. We can talk about redevelopment. We've had some redevelopment on Nickel. Now we have 3 pot shops. This is a haphazard plan. The asset requirements and asset management required over the next 10 years will be horrendous. I just don't see how this plan, and I've gone to some of the open houses, I enjoyed their canopies and I enjoyed, their hospitality and their fancy little displays. But realistically, when we talk about the traffic coming downtown, nobody had an answer. And that's what's going to be the problem. You want to kill your downtown core, we're going to be putting in maybe an event center. How are they going to get there? No matter which site you pick, how are they going to get there? We can talk about transit. The transit is already going downtown. That'll already mean additional traffic in the downtown core. You start jamming it up on the way in, and you're going to run into problems. Implement the plans that you have. You have a neighborhood plan now. Implement that plan. We paid good money to have those plans done. Why start another one? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, there are 2 recommendations on...
Your Worship, there's one other delegation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Daniel Appel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Appel.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I understand it's very late. I'm speaking for the neighbors of Nob Hill in support of this project. Many of our neighbors have been following this plan for the time that it's been going on. We've attended pretty much all of the opportunities to put input in on this, and frankly, we've enjoyed the robust nature of the consultation, and we think the plan is a very good one and will have a very positive effect on our neighborhood. I think there is some merit to getting those lane widths reduced, and our society would like to see that done as quickly as possible, is pretty much how we'd like to put it. In fact, we see this as great to go full steam ahead. I would very much encourage you to authorize the discussions for component B, the functional design, and we'd like to see some results as soon as possible. We think it'd be very good for our community and our city and downtown development in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions for you, sir. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right. There are two recommendations that came forward from the presentation. They were there. They're gone now. There we are. Thank you very much. What's council's pleasure? Anyone wish to move those? Councillor Brennan.
I'd like to ask staff for some comments on these two recommendations from us, or for us. Special comments on the feasibility of doing it now, just the undertaking of it.
Thank you, Worship. I certainly think it's appropriate to direct staff to take a review. As has been mentioned earlier, there's a number of policy documents that have over time related to the desire to see an upgrade along Terminal Nickel, and I think it's appropriate to go back and make sure that those are all in alignment with this document. I also think as part of that process to direct it to staff, that would include a referral to both your planning and design and your Public Works committees. There's certainly projects associated of the capital nature that I think at least the committee should be aware of if they're going to be expected to be reviewing improvements in the future. The second part could very much be part of staff's report back in terms of the next steps and implementation of this document, which may include at that time a recommendation to actually adopt it, which I think would be a key step.
Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
I'm looking through the report that we received, the PDF, trying to find a component A and component B in the report, and I'm not finding it. I do find that, but I do not find a component A or component B and a breakdown of exactly what they are. So that really tells me one thing. Component B is functional design. Okay, what is it? And direct staff to undertake component A, city policy plans and bylaw review. That one I can understand because that's right there. But it's not outlined in the report that I can find. And I'm looking through it right now. There's 11 pages. And yeah, I just can't seem to find anything with regards to the breakdown on which policy is in plans, which bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually like Mr. Lindsay's idea of staff taking it back and reviewing what's in there and coming back to us with a report. I think that's a great idea.
Mr. Lindsay.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't have a lot more to add other than I thought Councillor Fuller was starting to ask a question about the functional design, and I was going to suggest that either myself or Mr. Foy could possibly provide some input on that.
Thank you. Mr. Foy?
There's two components. One is, as Mr. Lindsay addressed, looking at how this plan integrates into our existing planning documents. Functional design would be an opportunity for us to do some additional design work on the corridor and get to the point where if opportunities do present themselves, we have an actual corridor design to then implement. And it would be particularly important if developments came forward. We have something to say, this is the road that we're looking for, this is the corridor we're looking for, so they can integrate their developments into that concept.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I'm going to defer. I think we had Councillor Brennan and Councillor Bestwick on this committee and with Mr. Moss's group. And I just recall you guys as 8 a.m. early morning meetings. So I'm going to defer my, I don't know enough except the great presentation tonight. Thank you, Mr. Moss, for the sharing this evening. So until I hear more about our colleagues that are involved in this, that are thoroughly involved in, have to state on this, on the recommendation. Thank you.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to suggest that council might want to take Mr. Lindsay's idea and motion rather than the ones presented like everybody, I think, has come to consensus on, and go to staff for review and report back as well as committee.
Is anyone prepared to move that? Councillor Hong and Councillor Brennan. So it's now on the floor. Can you read it back to us, please?
Your Worship, I would suggest something along the lines that further report on implementation of the Terminal Nickel Reimagined study to staff, including referrals to the Planning and Development and the Public Works Committee.
Thank you. And discussion. Councillor Fuller, you're back in the queue.
Yeah. I'll support the motion, but I'd also make a request of Mr. Moss and Jana, I believe it is, that if we could get a copy of the whole presentation that you did tonight, because the one we've got does not include some of the stuff that was presented at the latter part. So I'd really like to see those drawings of the roadways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So having the full report.
Yep. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be supporting the motion, but through you, if I may, to Mr. Lindsay. Am I correct in what I thought I heard, that what is suggested on these recommendations from the group is part of what would be covered in your report, or you would investigate those?
That is correct, Your Worship. Direction for report on implementation, in my opinion, would include both the impacts on our existing policy documents, but also steps for moving forward, including adoption of a plan and key steps such as functional design.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
I guess I'd like to know if it would also include to have discussions with MOTI about the terms of reference. And when you said functional design, were you including that piece?
Your Worship, certainly if Council were to pass that motion, certainly staff would continue with our discussions with the Ministry of Transportation in preparation of that step. But I think likely when we return to Council, we would be seeking your formal direction on that item at that time.
Okay, thank you. I'm prepared to call for the vote.
It's already on the floor. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a final comment. I'm not for or I'm not against this, but I think we did strike some committees that I think this should go to the committees first. So I'm happy that Dale made the recommendation that goes to the committees, so we can hear from that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we now have question period. Oh, pardon me, Ms. Gurry. Okay, question period.
Fred Taylor of Nanaimo. Has there been any discussions with the provincial government and MOT in regards to this becoming a city road, this corridor? Because right now, I believe and understand it's provincially owned, maintained, costs of snow removal, ice, traffic lights, everything is all provincial. And I worry about the city in any move ending up with the corridor from Chase River to Woodgrove for maintenance costs and everything else. So I think that needs to be known what may happen if the city takes over trying to do something with this corridor. That's my concern as to if you can work with the provincial government. You already got the road from Pearson Bridge to Brecken Hill into city ownership. So if you end up taking any more, are you going to get the whole thing all the way to Woodgrove? And I think that needs to be understood somehow, that it remains a provincial road in cooperation of developing it. If they want to say it's yours, the city, what costs are we faced with? Snow removal, lighting, traffic lights, all kinds of everything to do with that road. Would you take it with a complete new repaving? What are the conditions that we are getting into here?
Okay, so just to answer your first question, council has given staff no instruction to enter into any discussions with the with MOTI with respect to taking over jurisdiction of Highway 19A.
You have some of 19A now, and maybe it's given you an indication of some costs of maintenance for lights, street lights, traffic lights, etc. All I'm concerned is this good idea, where it may go, and hopefully there's cooperation with the provincial government to maintain ownership and maintenance of it. If not, we could get it from Cedar Bridge, Chase River, all the way to Woodgrove. And what would be the cost to the taxpayer?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but if I had the opportunity to take over 19A from the south end all the way to the north, I'd do it in a New York minute because of the opportunities that it presents. However, again, council has given absolutely no instruction to staff to have any discussions with MOTI.
I'm just asking that.
Yep.
We
Thank
be
you.
aware.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Les Barkley, Nanaimo. I have 3 questions for council and staff arising from Mr. Mema's financial budget presentation today. I don't see him here, so I'll ask the questions and you can do your best. First question comes from page 30 of today's agenda. It refers to the hiring of a new communications specialist for the city in 2017. So my question is, well, what is the purpose of this new communications specialist, and what is the cost of this communications specialist? Can anyone answer that question?
No, not from this vantage point.
No. Okay. I wonder if that is. I understand that Mr. Mark McDonald was hired this year to be an assistant or a consultant in communications. I don't know if this is his role being expanded or not.
No, sir. And I would suggest that you hold that question for the return of the city manager. Should be here at our next meeting.
All right. Question 2, maybe council can answer this, and this comes from page 29 of tonight's agenda. The Police and Fire Support Services was excluded from this year's core services review. And looking at the budget, my question is, will council and staff include a review of police and fire support services in 2017.
It is intended to come forward.
So is that a
Whether
yes?
it is intended to come forward. Whether it comes forward by 17 or not, that's to be determined.
All right. And question 3 from page 31 of tonight's agenda. I understand there's a plan to spend $200,000 to develop an affordable housing strategy and social wellness strategy. So will this $200,000 be spent on another consultant? It's a concern I have, the number of consultants, outside consultants that the City of Nanaimo has employed in 2016. So will this $200,000 be spent on another consultant?
One would have to suggest we'll have to wait until that rolls out.
All right, so an uncertain answer. All right, thank you.
Councillor Hong.
I'm going to probably say yes, because we only have one staff member in the social planning department.
Yep.
Can I say something on that?
Councillor Kep.
Yeah, I guess I just want to respond that typically council gives the budget over to the staff, and then they facilitate the management of the time, the management of the people, the management of the product. And a lot of times when we hand off projects to the staff, they facilitate the staffing levels. We really don't know much about it. They require it and they bring it forward as a new person or as a higher level of service. Typically we'll find that. But typically we don't have a lot to do with the hiring and the firing of the staff because of the one employee model that we have.
Sir.
I have a very general question, which I would like to preface by saying I was very happy to hear that staff is looking at the parameters of a COW meeting. I think we are going to be tested on the 19th, meeting in the SARC building with, my question relates to how many millions of dollars of budget are going to be included in that meeting, because I think there are a very large number of very large expenses which are going to be approved in that small room. And is that going to be a consideration in determining what can be done in a COW meeting?
Do you have a question, sir?
That's it. Do we have any idea of the parameters that will be put on a COW meeting as far as the kinds and expense that can be approved in a tiny room over in the SARC building?
Well, as it stands right now, that would depend on whether or not the bylaw, the delegation to the committee of the whole changes.
Yes, that's why I'm asking staff in terms if there's any ideas about
Well, until
what the parameters are that might
we
be
can't answer that question until such time as it comes forward to council for debate.
Yes,
Your
many things
worship?
were late. That's true.
Ms. Gurry?
Yes, I'd just like to add that right now the community charter, section 154, bylaws can't be passed at a committee of the whole under
Yes,
that,
no,
and never
I
could be.
understand
So
that
that
part.
one part
Question
of
is,
the
are there going
bylaw.
to be any further conditions on meeting in that room? I quite agree with council that it's much more comfortable to meet in a small room around a small table than in this venue. The question is, to what extent are major issues, is the public shut out of real participation in major issues when we do that? And should there be some major issues that just shouldn't be there, period, and other than simply bylaws, which often affect very few people? Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim McGrath, 431 3rd. I'm here asking council what the intentions are to do with the neighborhood community planning processes that have already occurred. I understand that some of the council was with the Terminal Nickel Reimagined Committee. How did they jive the two? What is the intention?
Councillor Brennan.
Well, there were some neighborhood representatives on the committee. But in actual fact, what happened was that the committee structure was dismantled. And so it wasn't clear whether councillors were intended to be a part of that committee or not. So at some point, because it was not made clear to me whether that committee was affected by the dismantling, I stopped going to it.
So it went on for a year and a half and you still don't know what your standing was? Is that what you're explaining to me?
I'm suggesting to you that at one point it was said that the terminal nickel imagining plan was not part of the city select committees that we had developed, and that they should go it alone. So I stopped attending. That would have been last January, Mr. McGrath.
Well, I'm sure that you were aware that there was a neighborhood plan for the south end, and in that neighborhood plan, it has a corridor plan. So my question to you, to council, is what are you now going to do with those neighborhood plans if you're now instructing staff to do something totally different, totally separate and apart from the neighborhood plan?
I'm just not sure that that's correct.
What's incorrect about it?
I'm just not sure that how you've characterized it is correct. I don't think that we have asked staff to abandon that.
Okay.
So I don't want to argue with you about it.
You are aware that there is a neighborhood plan. Is that correct?
Mr. McGrath, I've told you what I think. You won't get anything more from me because that is what I think.
Well, your response doesn't make sense, and that's why I'm asking you to clarify.
Mr. McGrath, we have other speakers who'd like to answer your question. Councillor Bestwick.
Thanks. Thanks, Tim. I was on the Terminal Nickel Reimagined committee for about 6 or 7 months, and I think I attended about 4 meetings. And then that project was initiated for the furthest southern entry to the Pearson Bridge. So it incorporated more than just the south end component, and it was trying to have a contiguous discussion about how traffic and pedestrians and cycling and businesses and all of those things from one end of the city to the other may be improved with this initiative. So it would have incorporated, the downtown neighborhood association, if you will, the southern, the ASICA, so I did the committee. I didn't. I can assure you that I didn't exhaust myself whether or not the committee of 17 or 18 people with professionals on there that were commissioned and responsible to bring forward the end report on the Tourism Nickel Reimagined project. I didn't read through the south end to ensure that it matched or didn't match or integrated or the fabric weaved with the, I did not. So I left that up to the professionals to bring back a report that may or may not have superseded portions of the south end or the mid-city or the whatever. And as we all know, when reports are done 2 years or 5 years ago, it's not a lot different than technology. Boy, oh boy, can things change from when a consulting report started 5 years ago, took 2 years to complete, it's been sitting on the shelf for 3 years, another report starts, another study happens. 7 years later, we're trying to figure out some of the same concerns with different ways, different ideologies, different whatevers. So I was sitting there for me personally, to try to learn more about what the ideas and the concepts could be, as opposed to ensuring that they matched up or didn't match up with what had already been done. So that's as honest as I can possibly be about my participation. Now we've sent it back to staff. the two motions, and I'm sure there's going to be more depth into what they report back on than just A and B, and how it integrates and how it flows and how we might be able to move forward or not, or how fast or how slow, or I'm sure there's going to be financial implications. I'm sure there's going to be HR implications. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of things identified. At least I hope that that's what staff bring back in their report. So I think there's probably more questions than answers at this point in time, but I'm certainly hopeful that staff can bring back some of those answers.
That's why I'm asking the questions. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
What exactly was your question again?
I'm inquiring as to the Terminal Nickel Reimagined
Yeah.
and how it's going to relate to the South End Community Network, the neighborhood plan.
Okay.
As you probably can enlighten some, the area in question, I think, is just the Chase River neighborhood and the South End neighborhood.
Chase River.
My understanding is
I don't believe Chase River is entered.
Chase River doesn't have a plan.
No.
So the plan
It's
would
not
be,
part of the South End neighborhood plan. But where you talk about Nickel Street and and stuff like that, it's interesting because I'm just taking a look at the South End neighborhood plan now, and Mr. Boone, who got up at the end and actually talked about reducing lane widths, that's what's in the Nickel Street or the South End neighborhood plan. However, I do recall through that discussion there was a lot of talk about reducing to two-lane traffic if at all possible. So it is there. There's actually, it shows parking on the streets, but most of the drawings show 4 lanes. Anything that could be done on that street to reduce traffic would, in my speed of traffic, would, in my opinion, be great. I'm all for throwing those spike belts out every once in a while just to slow people down, because 99% of the people that travel down that road speed anyway. They do.
I would agree with
I live
that.
on the road. I know this for a fact, and it scares me. Even at a lighted crosswalk, you do not walk when it says walk, otherwise you are at risk of getting hit.
I recall the accident right out in front of your place in the last year.
Yeah, there was a motorcycle accident there. But I actually had a friend of mine who was actually hit by a car and run over by a car a number of years back. So it's always been a difficult area. And quite frankly, I like some of the stuff they've brought forward in the Terminal Nickel Street plan. I think it's great if we can implement it. And other stuff as well. And the South End Community Association seems to be on side with it. And to me, that's the most important part of the picture, is that they are on side of it, with it.
Well, them in the downtown, you're correct.
Yeah.
So my question comes full circle. Is it going to be the Terminal Nickel Corridor, or is it going to be changed into the neighborhood plan? Are they going to be incorporated together? Are you throwing one out? Or are you continuing with one?
I think it will be a combination of both, ultimately. We will have to wait and see what report comes back through Mr.
Because
Lindsay.
the reason why I'm asking is because the first plan hasn't even been completed, and yet now we're bringing in something new again.
But that happens all the time. All the time. You develop plans and you readjust them. And like I say, the South End Community Association is on side with it. So I'm leaning towards their viewpoint on this.
Okay. So I would take it as it being a readjustment of the neighborhood plan?
Guess like us, you will have to wait and see.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp is in the
Thank
queue.
you. Thanks. Mr. McGrath, your concern here, and what I want to get at it, is back in 1996, we talked about Plan Nanaimo and neighborhood plans being the basis of our whole community.
Correct.
And your concern now, like one of the previous speakers, about how many consultants we're going to hire, is how many plans do we have that we continue to write and don't finish? Or are we just like I'm going to bring up Collery Dam with 62 plans, and we're talking about the middle dam now having more plans done for it and more consultants. And that's a real concern to me. I will go with Councillor Fuller's thing that these are living documents too. Once these plans are adopted, they're somewhat living because things change, the dynamics. That road was the Island Highway. It was the #1 highway, Trans-Canada Highway, for a good portion of my life when I lived on Halliburton Street. And, it had and when the mayor talks about 1951, he mentioned earlier today, there was only 8,000 people in Nanaimo in 1951 when I was born. There's 89,000 now. We've moved the highway out of town. The idea that traffic calming would cause congestion, yes, it might, because some of the morons driving down that road at 80K now, passing on the inside lane, have to be controlled. They can't do it themselves. It's like me around this table sometimes. I can't control my emotions. Some of them can't control their gas pedal. To make our community better, those internal road networks have to become smaller now because they've dissected our community. Unbelievable. Hardly anyone crosses a 4-lane road to get there. They lose their neighbors on the other side. They lose their friendships across a four-lane street. And that's been throughout our history of our North American planning, where we put massive roads in to move cars. It's so focused on cars. And really, we have too many plans.
And that's
they should mesh. They should mesh. And as far as I'm concerned, 2 lanes of traffic coming in there at 60, 70K now. It's wild, and I drive fast. I'm moving. I see ahead of myself. If there's 2 lanes, I'm using them, and I'm one of them arrogant drivers out there. So we have to be controlled. So I guess my biggest thing is the hierarchy of documents I want to get to. What is the hierarchy? What is our most important document? Is it our budget? Is it our OCP? Is it just a strategic plan? I would suggest our official community plan and then our budget are hugely important, and all the plans should fall into that. But I'm tired of rewriting plans, and not seeing anything hit the ground but a bill for another consulting firm. So I agree with you, and I agree with the previous speakers on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other motion? Motion to go in camera. Okay. Ms. Gurry.